The Sicilian defense is the most aggressive way to respond to e4. And today I'm going to be showing you guys another variation of the Sicilian. And this one is called the hedgehog variation of the Sicilian. It's also called the Chevin engine. Now, what is important is the setup. Like what I'm about to show you, you could get into the setup from playing the Nador or the Khan. Let's say they guard the pawn here. You're going to play moves like e6 followed by a6 followed by bishop e7 castle, knight d7, pawn b6, bishop b7. Once you remember this setup, then you're going to be outplaying people. Now, here's how it looks on the board. Let's say they're just developing and we're just playing normal moves. The king is out the center of the board. Now we play a6, b6. And the reason why it's called the hedgehog is we're not trying to move any pawns past the sixth rank just yet. And anything that passed our half of the board is basically going to get stung or get spiked. So, for example, let's say they finish their development. We play b6. Now we play bishop b7, and then the knight goes to d7. Now, okay, that's also a free pawn, so nobody's gonna hang a free pawn. But basically, how this works is while you're getting this setup, your opponent is not gonna know what to do. They're not gonna know what the plan is against this. So there, two things are gonna happen. They're gonna start an attack too quickly, which doesn't work, and then they're gonna blunder, or they're just not gonna know what the plan is, and then they're still gonna blunder. And here you still know what the plan is. Even after this setup, you're going to play moves like, let's say the queen goes to c7, and let's say the rook comes to e8. I'm just making some moves for white, and then the rook comes to c8. Even after getting this setup, there's still more plans. You could play queen b8, bishop d8, bishop c7, then pawn to d5. You could also play king h8, rook g8, pawn g5, pawn g4 to start an attack on the opponent's king. So once you know all the moves, plus you know the plan, you should be doing fine. So I want you to watch this full video, apply the stuff that I teach, and watch your ratings go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region, today I'm going to be showing you guys the Sicilian defense, and in particular, we're going to be playing the hedgehog version of the Sicilian. So he plays pawn to b3, and just to get our regular setup, this is actually a very new and interesting move. Let's just play the move pawn to a6, and I'm not playing the Sicilian can, by the way, we're playing the hedgehog version of the Sicilian, so we're going to play pawn to d6. Now he plays c4. Now let's play pawn to d6, continuing with the hedgehog setup. And again, all we need to do is to know the setup. Once we know the setup, everything else becomes very easy. So he plays knight c3, which is weird. Not sure why he would play b3 and not fianchetto the bishop. But let's continue with the plan. As we spoke about, the knight goes to f6, the bishop goes to e7, knight goes to d7, king is castled, pawn goes to b6, bishop goes to b7, rook goes to c8, queen goes to c7. Like once you know all of this stuff, you should be fine. Ooh, so we've seen an immediate pawn to e5. Usually when they play immediate pawn to e5, okay, first we have to take, and then the knight takes. But if they do this quickly, we can actually take a different approach. We don't necessarily have to go everything exact, but if we're able to do certain things similar, for example, bishop will be going to e7, but now in this case, the bishop could go to d6 because it hits the knight. The queen usually goes to c7, and because if the queen goes to c7, it still hits the knight, then I'm going to play queen to c7. Now I think he has to either pull the knight back or protect the knight, and this should not be too good for white. He's not losing, but he's going to play some weird move, like move the same piece more than once in the opening, or d4, which will weaken his dark squares so much. So he did play d4, and at this point, his dark squares are just extremely weak. Now, here's what I'm planning on doing. There's a few moves I could play. I could start with bishop d6, or I could take. Once the queen takes, I play bishop c5, and that's a tempo on the queen. And then the queen is going to be forced to move to f4. And then I can pull the bishop back and apply more pressure on the knight. Is this just loot? No, I don't think it's losing, but let's try. Let's take on d4. If the queen takes, we play bishop c5, developing our bishop, gaining a tempo on the queen. And then once the queen moves, I think that's the only square where he could put the queen where he's just not losing. So queen takes d4 was played, and as we looked on is, I'm trying to do a removing the guard tactic. So I'm attacking the knight, it's only been guarded by the queen. So let's play bishop c5, attack the piece that is guarding the knight. And based on what I'm seeing, there's nowhere the queen could go where it keeps defending the knight except f4. But then if the queen goes to f4, we pull the bishop back to d6 and the knight will be pinned and I will be applying pressure to the pinned knight. And this is how the hedgehog is going to be going. You're just playing your setup, and while you're playing your setup, they're just going to blunder. Like almost all the games in this video will go like this. So he decides to put his queen on h4, and now his whole entire position is crumbling. His dark squares are so weak. Like everything that is on a dark square is weak. Unprotected, 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 exposed. Let's take the free knight, hit the king, and we're also attacking the unprotected knight. So if he doesn't want to lose even more material, he has to play such an ugly move, king to d2, which gets the king out of check and protect the knight. Okay, bishop to e2, which means now the knight hangs and the rook hangs. You guys are always saying, that's a fort, by the way. Why are these 500 rated players so strong? Oh, not Matthew. Not Matthew. All right, so now he has to move the king or block with the bishop, but we're just going to take the rook. And then I'm not sure. Maybe he's going to resign, but let's see. So he moves his king to d1. Let's just grab the free rook, and it's crazy. We're what? 11 points of material extra in the Sicilian defense. Just like that. Poor Matthew. Now I'm going to castle my king, maybe play rook to d8 and check the king. I'm also thinking about bishop a3 to pp on the pp. More than likely, we're not going to be using this light squared bishop to win this game. Maybe not even this knight. So he plays queen f4 to defend the bishop, which I understand because the plan was to apply more pressure to the bishop. But let me just use the time to get my king out the center because his king is in the center. And then I'm just going to continue the attack on his king. Like rook to d8 is coming next. Into d2. Okay. I think Matthew is trying to play some bishop a3 ideas. But let's continue with our attack here. Let's play rook to d8, check. Because at this point, the king is not really able to go to too many squares, assuming he's going to be blocking with his bishop, unless he puts the king on c2, and that could be leading to him getting checkmated. In fact, remember when I told you guys I'm not going to use this light squared bishop? Probably going to be using it because pawn e5 hits the queen, and then in some cases, my bishop could come to f5 and check his king. Okay, so king to c2 was played. If I take, he's going to block with the bishop. So let's first play e5 and attack the queen. And based on how Matthew has been playing, I'm not sure. Maybe he's going to think that taking on e5 is a free pawn and blunder his queen. But let's see. Okay, he didn't decide to blunder his queen. He blundered his rook instead. But hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. Let's just take the rook. His queen is still under attack, but my pawn is left hanging. So assuming he's going to be taking on e5, hitting my bishop. And I could play something like knight d7, hitting the queen, guarding the bishop, which is what he did. There's also a rook e1, and then if he takes my bishop, I take. A lot of stuff that I could do here. Let's go knight d7. Let's just bring more pieces in the game. This is completely winning, by the way. Let's see where he puts his queen. Queen c7, it's the unprotected rook. See, all of a sudden he's now playing aggressive. Let's play rook to e8 though. Hit the unprotected bishop. Offense is the best defense. Bishop to g4. And Matthew strikes again. All these level 1 blunders. Let's just take the bishop. That's a free bishop. And you guys are going to understand what I mean by the different levels of blunders in this video. I decided to explain all the different levels of blunders in this video. I'm going to be making a separate video on that as well, but you guys should learn a lot from this video about that. And Matthew decided to resign. But more Sicilian defense against 600 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 600. More Sicilian defense coming your way. So knight f3, let's play e6 followed by a6. And I'm not necessarily playing the Sicilian Khan. It's just that this variation you could play like the Khan, you could play like the Nadorf, and it will still transpose into this line. And in terms of where to put the pieces, very, very simple. So he puts the bishop on e2. Let's play a6. And usually in the Khan, we play queen c7, knight f6, knight g4, and then try to checkmate the king this way. But in the hedgehog variation, we're trying to focus more on slow development. So for example, pawn d6, knight f6, getting all our pieces on their ideal squares first. Usually while you're doing this, the opponent is going to be blundering. But if they don't blunder, you're still going to know exactly where your pieces belong. So pawn to d3, let's go knight to f6, bishop to g5. Now we play bishop to e7, and then we simply castle the king. Very simple setup. He got his king out the center of the board. I'll also get my king out the center of the board. Queen plays pawn c3. He's actually taking a very slow approach, but as we said, we actually know exactly where we're going to be putting the pieces and then what the pieces are going to be doing. So pawn b6, bishop b7, queen c7, swing the rooks in the game. And then even after swinging the rooks in the game, we should know what the plan is. So knight d2, first let's play b6. Knight c4 doesn't really attack anything, so let's continue with the plan. Bishop b7. I'm going to put my queen on c7. You again, usually while you're doing this, the opponent is going to make some mistake. He made his first mistake giving up a bishop for a knight. Maybe he thinks once I take on f6, he wins a pawn, but instead I'm just going to be taking with the knight and then continue with the plan. Queen goes to c7, rook to d8, rook to c8. Ooh, pawn to e5 is an interesting move. He's applying some pressure here. Let's take on e5. Now I'm assuming he's going to be taking with one of his knights, but again, it shouldn't do too much. The queen is still going to c7. The rook is still going to d8. The rook is still going to c8. So he took with the knight. Let's go queen c7, which means all the minor pieces are now developed. The rooks are connected, which means from now it's just a matter of bringing the rooks in the game. So for example, pawn d4, he's going for a pawn break, which is the right idea. Let's play rook to d8, putting the rook on the same line as the king, which means his pawn on d4 is pinned. Okay, knight to h4 is putting the knight on the edge of the board. Is there a way to punish this? Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start by playing the move knight to e4, just centralizing my knight. But this is actually a discovered attack on his knight that is on the edge of the board. My bishop is secretly attacking the knight. So even if he plays, well, I was about to say if he plays pawn f3, I'm going to take, but then once he takes, he's actually attacking f7. So he still decided to attack f7. And okay, this is now just losing because for one, I could take on h4, and then once he takes, I move the king. But first, I'm going to play the move pawn to g6 just to force his bishop away. Then I'm going to take on h4. So that being said, I'm definitely expecting him to sacrifice on g6. Usually, whenever the opponent tries to double sacrifice on g6, I accept one of the sacrifice. So he did sack. Let's take on g6. And then once they sack again, I don't accept the other one. But it all depends on the situation because all my pieces are actually pointing towards the king side. It's very easy for my queen to go over and protect my king. And if he's going to sacrifice another piece, he's only going to have a queen and a knight, which is a good combination, but shouldn't be checkmating my king, which is what he's doing. He's sacrificing everything. Let's take on g6. And again, I tell you guys, this is most of your games are going to be going like this. Because of how you're playing, they're going to think that you're playing very passive, but you actually have no weaknesses in your position. So they're going to either try to play overly aggressive, which is just going to lead to them blundering, or they're just not going to know what to do. And that's going to cause them to blunder. So I'm expecting him to take. I'm going to play bishop f6. Queen to g4 here would be a nice move, but if queen g4, I'm just going to get rid of the knight. Once I get rid of the knight, the queen by itself won't be able to do anything. So he did decide to take with the knight. He's attacking my bishop. Let's just move the bishop to f6 so that way, if the queen decides to come in to attack, let's say the queen comes to g4, putting the queen on the same line as my king, I play queen g7. For example, here, so now we play queen g7. Queen takes e6 is a move, but then I'm going to play queen f7 and block with the queen. And I'm ahead by 2 pieces, so I'd love to just trade the pieces off the board here. Pawn to f3 hits the knight. Okay, do we have to move the knight? What's wrong with a move like, let's say, king to f7? Because I'm trying to trade, right? So king f7, if he takes my knight, I take his knight. And if he takes my queen, I take his queen. And then he has no attacking moves after that. King f7, if he checks, I take. Let's play king f7. Not moving the knight because, again, offense is still the best defense. Yeah, and then he went for this, which I think should be blundering because, nah, not really a blunder. Let's just take, though. Like, whenever someone is attacking you, the goal is to just trade off the attacking pieces. What would be interesting is if he decides to play pawn takes knight, checking my king. No, and then if I move my king away, which is what he did, the thing is though, his queen will always remain under attack. I could still block with the bishop as well. So let's just block with the bishop. If he takes, I play king takes and I'm fine. If he pushes, he hung his queen. If he checks, I'm able to block the check. So he did decide to push, thinking, oh, I'm PPing on the PP. But that's just a free queen, bro. I mean, maybe if he was playing against someone at a low level, he would have won. Because I mean, it was an aggressive attack, but it wasn't really hard to defend against. Now I have 2 pieces threatening a checkmate on g2, so he has to guard the mate, which he didn't, which means that's just a checkmate. more Sicilian defense against 700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700. Let's continue to play some Sicilian defense. They call it the Sicilian Hedgehog, the Chevron engine. And I mean, you guys just need to know the setup. There's a lot of different ways to get to this position. So you could like trick people into playing the Nadorf, but then you play the Chevron engine, or trick them into thinking you're playing the Khan, but then you play the Chevron engine. So knight to f3, let's go e6 here. And then the opponent decides to play g3, which is I've seen a lot of persons fianchettoing their bishops against the Sicilian defense, which is not a bad way to play. Let's play d6 here. Let's just continue with the setup. Remember, all we need to do is to know the setup. Pawn goes to a6. He castles. Now we play knight to f6, attack the pawn on e4. I mean, maybe pawn to e5 is an idea. He didn't play that though. He played d3, and he's basically just trying to develop his pieces normally. I'm going to put the knight on d7 here, so that way it's now hard for him to play e5. And usually when they have a bishop on the same diagonal as your rook, it's going to be harder for you to move the b pawn. So ensure that you keep that in mind, because you don't want to move the b pawn and then start falling for some tactics here. But after bishop g5, let's just play bishop to e7 here, get the king out the center of the board, queen c7, maybe b6. Okay, knight d2, let's castle. I mean, my opponent is developing very well. I'm assuming he's going to be giving up his bishop for a knight though, because this bishop doesn't really have a lot of squares to move to. Rook to e1, okay. Now he may want to play e5, but let's go queen c7. We're just making it as hard as possible for them to play e5. So a4 was played to prevent b5, and first I'm going to play h6 because, playing this opening, we don't allow pieces on our half of the board. Now, once the bishop moves away or he decides to give up the bishop for the knight, we take with the bishop, put our bishop on a very nice diagonal, attacking his unprotected pawn. Now I'm expecting him to play something like pawn to c3. Like, once he plays pawn to c3, then, he should be safe, which is what he played. And now I'm going to play rook to b8. It prepares b5, and I don't want to move the b pawn while this bishop is on this diagonal. He quickly plays knight c4 though, but now I'm able to play b5 and I'm just attacking the knight. It's not terrible for him because once I take knight to a5 looks like something, but then I'm going to play rook a8 and attack the knight. So I'm assuming he has to just pull the knight back to d2. Oh, okay, knight e3 is also fine. Uh, I want to play bishop to b7, but I'm going to wait a bit and play b4 because I'm actually trying to start some attack on his queen side here. For example, if he takes, I should be able to take and attack the rook. I'm assuming he needs to play pawn to d4 here. So that way, once I takes, maybe I take again. Yeah, I think his position is just very safe if he plays d4. Okay, rook to c1 was also fine. That was also fine. He's putting his rook on the same line as my queen, so I have to be careful. So let's take on c3, and then once he takes on c3, I'll play queen a5. Now I'm attacking his pawn twice, plus I'm also taking my queen off the same line as his rook. My light squared bishop is the only piece that is not yet developed. I'm trying to put it on a6 or b7. B7 is fine. Oh, okay. Knight c4 was just a nice move. That was just a nice move. I forgot about knight c4. Because now he's hitting my queen and d6. So now I have to put the queen back on c7. Now he's able to play d4. Okay, I think he has a very nice position. If he plays d4, that is. Let's see. I'm not sure why he would play king h1, to be honest. There's d5 to hit the knight, but let's go bishop to a6, hit the knight that way. Like, in a lot of cases, I could be thinking about giving up my bishop for the knight to give him some very ugly double pawns. So maybe he's going to move the knight, and my plan from there is maybe to play rook b2, attacking this unprotected pawn. There wasn't really any reason to play king h1. It's not like he was planning on moving the f pawn or anything. Okay, queen to a4 was played, which means if I take, he plays queen takes, and there's no reason to give up the bishop for the knight if you get nothing for it. But what I'm going to do is play the move bishop to b5 first to attack the queen. Now, he has to ensure that he keeps the queen guarding the knight on c4. If he moves away the queen, then I could take on c4 and double up the pawns. The thing is, though, if he puts his queen on b6, putting the queen on the same line as my rook, I'm not really seeing any discovered attacks that I can do right away. But maybe after I play d5 and chase away the knight, I should be able to take on d3. Okay, so he did play queen to b3, and what I'm seeing is queen is on the same line as my rook. Now, what I'm going to do is play pawn to d5 to attack the knight. And my whole idea is it doesn't matter if he takes, eventually he has to move the knight. Okay, that may not work. Because what I wanted to do was once he moved the knight, I take on d3, and that's a discovered attack on the queen. But his queen would have took here. Okay, pawn to e5 is weird. Okay, pawn to e5 is just losing. He was doing well though, like everybody below 1,000, they always do well and then just make a weird blunder. Because now I'm able to simply take, attack the queen, and then even if he takes, I pull my bishop back, saving my bishop, attacking his queen. And then once the queen move, then I take a free pawn on e5. So let's just take the free knight, attacking his queen. Offense is the best defense, so he's not able to take my bishop. And then once he takes, I have two bishops under attack. But what I'm going to do to save both of them is first pull the bishop back to c6, which means the queen is under attack. In addition to that, I have one, two, three pieces attacking e5. He only has two pieces guarding e5. So once he moves the queen, I'll take another pawn. Okay, so he moves the queen. Even after taking this pawn and he plays knight takes, I could also take on g2. Why? I'm ahead by a piece. I'm trying to trade all the pieces off the board. So he took with the knight. First, let's trade because the goal is to trade. We're about to be ahead in material. Now we take the knight and we're just ahead by 3 points here. So just trading the pieces off the board should just help us to win. I'm assuming he's going to play queen e4, apply some pressure to my bishop, which he did. But I'm just going to move the bishop. My bishop is perfectly placed on f6, targeting this weak pawn. This rook on f8 is what I need to bring in the game. But I'm just going to play rook to d8. And if I could get both of my rooks on his second rank, that could lead to mate. But he played rook to d1. I'll play rook to d8 anyways. I don't mind trading. I'm the one who's ahead in material. Queen back to e3 was played. Okay, okay. Let's put one rook on the second rank. If he takes, I takes, and then if queen takes, I could play queen to d2 or okay, yeah, maybe just immediate queen to d2. Hit the rook, hit the pawn, hit f2, and anytime he checks me on the back rank, I'll just play king h7 and he won't have anything. So he took. Let's take with the queen. So that way, if he takes here, I play queen to d2, and then I have two pieces on his second rank. So I'm basically sacrificing a pawn to go for some checkmating attacks. I'm going to be winning back the c3 pawn. Okay, queen f3 was what he played instead. Still putting the queen on the second rank. Well, he should be able to play rook to d1 because the f pawn is guarded. If rook to d1, do I take on c3? If he checks, I play king h7. If he checks again, I play pawn g6 and he won't have any more checks. So let's take on c3. And that's not the right thing to do, bro. Like, don't be trading queens if you're losing. Because now I'm just going to play bishop d4 and take on f2. Even if you decide to defend f2, I'll still take on f2. Because mathematically, I just have way more pawns than you. He checks. Let's just move the king. Now he attacks the pawn, but I guard the pawn, hit f2, and this is now GG's. Okay, he just decides to move the king. So from here, I'm just going to start taking all his pawns. I could also try to get my bishop to g1 in some ways to set up a checkmate, but he resigns. More Sicilian against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. Let's play some Sicilian defense. Knight f3, let's play e6 here. We can also play d6. We can also play a6. Once you know the setup, everything should be fine. Pawn d4, let's just take on d4. And then after knight takes, we're going to play a6. We could have also done this if we played d6. Bishop c4. One thing that you guys should do is you could try to play knight f3, hit the pawn, knowing that if they play e5, we're able to fork. But then after a move like knight to c3, you have to ensure that you don't allow them to play e5. So now it's time to play d6, preventing d5. And we're basically going into our Shevin engine setup. So he castle. Let's go bishop e7. And then the knight went back to f3, which is definitely wasting time. I guess he wants to play e5. So I'm going to play queen c7, preventing e5, attacking the unprotected bishop. So now he also has to move the bishop again. And then once he moves the bishop, we just get to our king out the center of the board. Rook to e1, which means he really wants to play e5. So I'm going to play the move knight d7 to prevent e5. And then if he plays bishop f4, like insisting on e5, I may just put my knight on the e5 square. That's also another thing that you guys could do. And oh, by the way, if you guys want to play against me, just leave your username and the ELO that you want to represent in the comment section. Pawn to a4 was played to prevent b5. So now we're going to play pawn to b6 instead and put the bishop on b7. So it's still the whole hedgehog formation. You guys know I also like to play pawn to b5, by the way, because sometimes I'm able to chase away the knight and win the e4 pawn. But other ways to attack the e4 pawn is just bishop b7, knight c5. So bishop f4 was played, and now he really wants to play e5, as we said. But now I'm going to play knight e5. And it's a nice little move. Like if he takes and I takes, I have doubled pawns, but I have a pawn on e5 guarding d4, and I didn't have to push d5 in order to weaken my d5 score. Rook to e3 was played. I guess he's trying to protect his knight. I can attack the rook, but let's finish our development first. Let's focus on the setup. Rook d8, rook to c8. All our pieces are going to be active, and then we're going to be starting some attack. Usually, before we finish our hedgehog setup, the opponent blunders, but let's see. Bishop to g5 was played. Okay, applying some pressure to my knight. Easy chase away. Easy chase away. I want to take, and if rook takes, I take. But if I take, he's always going to play queen takes. So first, let's ensure that we don't allow any pieces on our half of the board. And then we play rook d8, rook c8. Bishop back to h4 is also a nice move. Knight g6 hits the bishop. Bishop g3, knight h5 hits the bishop. Pawn e5. Grab the bishop, then take on e5 is something. So he did play bishop to h4. Before I go for this idea of chasing his bishop, let's play rook to d8 first and put my rook on the same line as the queen. So eventually in the future, if he plays e5 and I take, his queen is going to be immediately under attack. Queen to e2 was played. That's the correct thing to do. And again, before I go for this, let's finish our development. Now, every piece is active and doing something. And I want you guys to notice the good thing about the hedgehog is it's very hard for the opponent to play a move where his piece is on your half of the board because we have no weaknesses. Rook to d8 was played. Now we play knight g6 to hit the bishop. And then once the bishop moves, we play knight h5. And the whole idea is basically to just get the bishop here, to be honest. There's also knight to f4, which attacks the queen. Flag is this? Zambia. So bishop to g3. Now we play knight h5 to hit the bishop. Pawn to e5. I should be able to take first, then take on e5. So not sure what he's gonna play. Again, there's knight f4 ideas, but let's just see what he does. Okay, he plays rook to d2, just not blundering anything. Very smart. Let's get rid of the bishop. So now we could at least say we have the bishop here. And then I'm thinking of playing bishop to f6. Oh, he took away from the center of the board. That's a mistake. Yeah, that's definitely a mistake. And now his king and his rook is on this diagonal. What if I play d5 now? Play d5, he takes, and then bishop c5. Oh, but then he takes, and that could cause a lot of drama. Okay, if bishop c3, there's rook d3. So let's play knight e5 with the same idea. If he takes, I take. I'm still threatening bishop c5 and bishop g5. And these double pawns are not bad because they're still connected with the other pawns. Ah, okay, king to h8. Yo, where are these 800 guys coming from? I mean, it's crazy. A lot of persons are seeing it in the comments, but now I'm seeing it. The lower rated guys is holding their own. It's just the blunders that they make, man. Okay, so what if I take? If I take, he's gonna play rook takes. Nah, he's gonna play pawn takes. There's no bishop g5. Knight c4 I like, and after takes, queen takes, and I have the bishop here. It's crazy. I have to be using some advanced type of strategies in order to beat the lower rated players. For example, I now have what is called the bishop here, and the bishop here is usually good in the endgame. So now I'm trying to bring the game into an endgame because I have the two bishops and the opponent has the two knights. So now if he takes, I play rook takes, and again, it's just a matter of time until I play a move like d5. I just want to play d5 and I want to be able to take back with the bishop because if I have to take back with the pawn, it's blocking out my bishop and I don't like that. And the purpose of having this bishop on e7 is to guard the d6 pawn. Pawn to e5 was played. I like that for me though because he's basically helping both my bishops to be active. We're definitely taking that pawn. Yeah, actually if I take now he takes and then I can't take with the rook. So let's trade the queens first. And then once he takes, then we take the pawn. So he takes. Now we take so that way both my bishops are just active. His back rank is also slightly weak. Slightly. It's not very weak. It's slightly weak. Okay, knight e5. I like the idea of playing bishop to b4. I'm trying to get rid of this knight and then go to his back rank. I'm also thinking of just giving up one of the bishops. I'm still gonna have a bishop versus a knight, which is better for me, but his pawn structure is gonna be very bad, and I could use that to win the game because his pawn structure over here is already bad, and I already have this pass pawn in the center. So he pulls the knight back to f3. What if I give up both the bishop here? What if I take here, and then if he takes, I take here, and then if he takes, I check, and then once he blocks the check, I take, and then once he plays rook takes, I win the pawn. This is called conversion. It's also called transferring one advantage into another one. So I'm basically going to trade in the bishop here for a free pawn. But let's see if it really works. First, I grab this knight. He undoubles his pawn. Oh, doesn't work then because he undoubles his pawn and his back rank is not weak. But we're definitely grabbing this knight. Let's grab this knight for sure. Because I'm also able to play rook to c4 and attack this pawn, and we're in the endgame. Remember what we do in the endgame? We attack the opponent's pawns. Okay, he took with the pawn. Now if I check, he blocks with the rook, and if I takes, he takes with the knight. So let's just play rook c4, attacking pawns in the endgame. Rook to c8 is also an idea, just doubling up on the c pawn. These are called weaknesses, by the way. Whenever the pawns look like this, it's very easy to attack them. Rook to d2, interesting move. But let's just take it. It's fine. I'm about to be ahead by a pawn. Let's just trade. After knight takes, we take here. His back rank is also weak, which means playing a move like rook d3, trying to get control over this file, isn't the easiest thing to do. But he plays c4. You see, I tell you about these guys. You play so well. You play so well. But then you blunder a back rank. Checkmate. That's crazy. Now he has to block with something, and he's gonna get checkmated. He blocks with the knight, and it's just a checkmate. More Sicilian defense against 900 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. Let's play some more Sicilian defense. Knight f3, we play e6 or d6, doesn't matter. Bishop c4, we play a6. And remember, the Italian game is actually not a good choice of opening against the Sicilian defense because the bishop on c4 with a pawn on a6 is very easily kicked away. And so the reason why, if you're going to play this, I would like for you to play the can as well, because when they play the Italian like this, the can would be perfect for it. But let's play our regular 7 engine that we're looking on. And after pawn d6, we're going to go knight f6, bishop e7, castle. And the whole idea is just to outplay them. Your set of moves is just going to be better than their set of moves. And for the record, this can be played with the white pieces if you start by playing c4. And if you want to play against me, leave a comment with your username on Chess Commander Ratings, and I'll send you a message. Now, once the king castled, let's play knight d7 first, so that way e5 is hard for him to play, and then we play knight f6. It's just a matter of the setup. You can also play queen c7 first. You can also play bishop e7. So knight c3, let's play knight f6. The setup is what is important to us here. Okay, bishop g5. Let's play bishop e7. And then rook e1, maybe he wants to play e5, so let's play queen to c7. And if they manages to play e5, it doesn't mean we're losing or anything, but I like to just keep the position together first, you know? Like castle, b5, bishop b7, get the rooks in the game, and then we decide we want to be the one who dictate what happens in the game. Okay, queen e2 was played. Yeah, now we're going to play b5, hit the bishop. Then we're going to play bishop b7. Then we're going to castle. I think he's going to play e5. If he plays e5, it's going to be bad because at the end, I'm going to play bishop to d6 and he's going to lose his h2 pawn. So once the bishop move and I play bishop b7 and he plays, so let's say he plays e5 now. I takes, knight takes, queen takes, bishop d6. Queen has to move. We take on h2 and we're going to be ahead by a pawn. Okay, he plays a3. Maybe he doesn't want to get his bishop trapped. Let's get our king out the center of the board. Now we're going to find squares for our rooks. There's no files on the board, so we just need to predict where we think the files are going to be and put our rooks there. For example, he plays rook to d1, so maybe he's going to play d4. So I'm going to put a rook on c8. So if he plays d4 and then I take, my rook is already going to be on a file. Okay, he plays a4. A4, I like to respond to A4 with B4 just to chase this knight away. And okay, his knight is not going to be on the best square. But he has a very nice position, though. I'm not gonna lie, it's not gonna be easy for me to like break through what's happening right here. But let's play h6 to chase that bishop out of our half of the board, and eventually I may have to play pawn to d5. So the bishop moves away. I'm gonna play rook to e8 because I may play pawn to d5, and if he takes, I want my rook on the file. If pawn to d5, there's pawn to e5 though that I need to be aware of. Okay, pawn c3 was played. Let's just play a5 to support our pawn. I don't want to take because it's going to help his knight to be on a better square. And, in some cases, I may put my bishop on a6. Like this 900 guy's playing very well, though. Like, he's not really making a lot of mistakes. Like, knight d2, also a fine move. He's getting his knight back into the game. Pawn to d5, pawn to e5. There's knight to h5. But that's not a good square for the knight. Maybe pawn to e5. Okay, let's go with the other plan of bishop to d8. There's a plan where we go bishop d8, queen b8, bishop c7, then play d5. So it makes it hard for them to play e5 in those types of scenarios. Plus, I also have a plan. Usually when the opponent has these types of position, it's kind of hard to come up with a plan because all their pieces are already doing something. And it's usually in these types of scenarios they start blundering. Knight c4, okay. Well, knight c4, I should be able to play d5. No, because after takes, I hit the queen, and if the knight moves, I take, and then e4 is under a lot of attack. Oh, but then if I play d5, there's bishop g3 though. So let's actually continue with the plan. Queen to b8. If my bishop is on c7 and I play d5, then there's no bishop g3. Okay, now he decides to play e5. Wait, what if I takes, queen takes, then I take? And if knight takes, I takes, and then if rook takes, I go bishop to c7, hit the rook. And then once the rook moves, then I take. It's kind of risky though. It's kind of risky because my knight on f6 is going to be under a lot of attack. So let's say I takes, queen takes, I take, knight take, I take, rook take, bishop c7, rook moves. My knight on f6 is very weak. I take with check, king moves. And then if I try to pull my bishop back, okay, maybe I could put the bishop on e5 in that scenario. If bishop e5, there's d4. And then takes. Wait. I think I have a plan. I'm going to do it. Let's take here. Because when I take, I notice that this bishop is unprotected. So I can also take here and attack the bishop. So once the queen takes, I takes. Knight takes. Maybe once he plays knight takes. So now I take. And then once he plays knight takes, maybe right here, I take on c3, and then his bishop is gonna be under attack. Oh, it's actually funny. He's not. I miscalculated the whole thing because after takes, I'm just gonna play queen takes. So he's not able to play knight takes. So he okay miscalculated that. So I'm just ahead by a pawn then. So bishop takes f3 was just a removing the guard tactic. Now if he takes, I'm just gonna take. But taking on c3 is still an idea to attack his bishop. So he took on f6. Now if I take with the knight, he takes here. So if I take with the bishop, he takes on e5. So I am going to take with the knight, allowing him to take on e5, because once he take on e5, then the idea of taking on c3 comes in, hitting the unprotected bishop. So once I take on c3, he has to save the bishop, and then I should be able to take on b2. So knight takes, now we take on c3. Knight to c6, I'm not afraid of, because that's just a free bishop. So he has to save the bishop here. Okay, I guess he just didn't see anything at all about the bishop because that's just a free bishop. Guy played very well though. I could say it's because its time was running out because he just didn't see that once I take, his bishop is hanging. Okay, took with the pawn. Let's just take here, opening the file for our rook. If he takes with the pawn, I trade the queens because I'm ahead by a piece. If he takes with the rook, then that's a free pawn. Took with the rook. Now we take on c3, hitting the queen, hitting the rook. I'm also hitting this rook, so kind of forcing him to trade the queens off the board. If he has to trade the queens being down by a piece, then it's just going to be bad for him. So he traded the queens. Let's just take. He has 10 seconds on the clock, though. So it's about to be the end of that game. With that being said, more Sicilian defense against 1,000 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,000. Let's play some Sicilian defense. So knight f3. And just to show you guys that I don't have to play e6 or d6, I'm going to play a6. And this is actually called the O'Kelly variation of the Sicilian, but that's actually not what I'm going to play. I'm going to eventually play e6 and d6, and it will be transposed into the Sicilian Chevin engine. So once bishop c4, this is also a good sign. The bishop really does not belong on c4 in a lot of Sicilian, especially with a pawn on a6, because pawn b5 is just going to be a very nice tempo. So after bishop to c4, let's just play pawn to e6 here. And, just to ensure that f7 is fine. And then I can always play moves like pawn to b5. So usually we play pawn to b6, but if a bishop is on c4, it's a free tempo. So he castled the king. Let's just play b5 and hit the bishop. Same plan. The pawn is just on b5 instead of b6. And then once the bishop move, I'll play bishop to b7 and attack the pawn. He also needs to ensure that he pulls his bishop all the way back to e2. Because if he pulls the bishop to b3, then his bishop is going to be trapped. So now that his bishop went back to e2, now we play bishop to b7, hit the pawn. And then once he guards the pawn, we're going to play d6 and then continue with our regular Sicilian O'Kelly. Nah, Sicilian Chevin engine. Okay, so pawn to d4 did not try to defend the pawn. You see, I clearly tapped the pawn and he didn't even try to defend it. So that's just a free pawn. The good thing is, if he takes my pawn, I take his pawn. So he's just down by a pawn here already, like 5 moves in. Okay, so rook to e8 was played. I need to be careful. The rook is on the same file as my unprotected bishop. But for now, I'm able to play knight f6 and guard it, so I don't really need to worry about much. But if he plays bishop to g5 and then pin my knight, then I may have to just pull my bishop back. So he did play bishop to g5. Let's just pull the bishop back. Knight to f3 was played. And okay, maybe it's time for us to take on d4. Yeah, let's now take on d4 so we could continue with the regular plan. I don't want to play bishop e7, then he takes on c5, and then I have to take on c5 again, because then I'm going to be moving the same piece more than once. He plays queen takes d4, which means I'm able to play knight c6 and gain a tempo on his queen. But let's play bishop e7 first, so that way he doesn't try to take and double up my pawns. I can also castle as well to stay flexible, and then I decide if I want to play knight to c6 or I just want to play d6, knight d7. I played rook to d1. Very good, by the way. You notice how the guy's playing with all his pieces? That's nice, bro. Now let me get my king out the center of the board. What flag is this? Algier. Always forget that. And then he plays h5. Personally, I wouldn't recommend you pushing pawns on the side that your king is on. Maybe he's trying to start an attack on my king, on his king side. But let's play h6. Let's just start neutralizing everything before he even starts. And then I'm just not playing knight c6 because I'm not sure if the knight belongs on c6 or d7. Because if knight c6 and he moves the queen, okay, maybe I'm gonna play knight c6. And then once the queen move, I play rook c8, knight a5, and then try to put my knight on the c4 square. And he decides to give up his bishop for a knight. So now once I take with the bishop, I'm hitting the queen and I'm hitting the pawn on h4. And that pawn on h4 is very weak, by the way. So if he does not put his queen somewhere where he's keeping the pawn guarded, he could lose it. But he did. So queen g4 is good. Okay, now I need to finish my development. Definitely need to finish my development here. Let's play knight c6, just finishing the development. There's nothing that I'm worried about that he have. I mean, there is knight e4 attacking my bishop. But if knight e4, I'm ahead by a pawn, so I could just trade it off like that. Or I could decide to keep the bishop by pulling my bishop back to d6, but he's still able to play knight to d6. And then that's going to be an annoying knight. I'm still probably going to have to trade it off anyways. So maybe if knight e4, okay, what am I saying? What did I just say? What I said didn't make any sense. But anyways, bishop to d3. There's a lot of pieces pointing towards my king. What to do? Pawn to d5 kind of blocks my bishop. Okay, I'm going to play knight e7 because there's a lot of pieces pointing towards my king, so I need to ensure that I'm safe. Like, I'm not going to lie, I'm ahead by a pawn, but the guy has compensation. His pieces are very active. If he plays knight e4 and attack my bishop, then I'm going to be forced to give up my bishop for a knight. And then after queen takes, threatening the mate, I play knight f5 to prevent the mate. And if he plays g4 trying to chase away my knight, I first play d5, hit the queen. And then, he's going to be exposing his king. So that's basically what's happening. So let's take on e4. Giving up the bishop for a knight. His pawn on b2 is also hanging. So once he plays queen takes, I play knight f5, preventing the mate. This is, you have to be very concrete while you're making moves like this, by the way, because he, I don't pawn g5 actually. I don't think pawn g5 works, but it's a decent move, you know, like it doesn't work because of the fact that I don't have to move my knight and offense is the best defense and I'm able to play d5. But if that was not the case, I would be losing my knight because my knight is pinned to the mate. So the thing about this position, now he has to move the queen and I also have three pieces attacking h4. He only has his knight guarding it. So I'm just going to use my same knight to take on h4 and I'm going to be ahead by a pawn and this king is going to be exposed. So he moves the queen. Now we take the free pawn. Now there's nothing to be worried about. If knight takes, I takes. This bishop I'm not worried about. Okay, if I have to worry about, I'm not worried about anything, by the way. But if for some reason I have to worry about something, is the fact that it's opposite colored bishops and, you know, usually favors the defensive side in the end game because they could try to draw the game. But there's a lot of pieces on the board. We're nowhere in the end game. And I'm ahead by 2 pawns. Should still be able to win. Now I need to get my rooks in the game because his rooks are definitely better than mine. Then played rook to e3, which is just a blunder, by the way. And one thing I talk about a lot is if you're playing against a dark squared bishop, your pieces belong on light squares. Imagine playing against a dark squared bishop and you're putting all your pieces on dark squares. That's how people get skewered, bro. Because now I'm just going to play bishop back to g5. The queen and the rook is on the same diagonal. Now once he moves the queen, I just take the rook. Okay, so he moves the queen. I just grab the rook. Now it's just a matter of trades, but I still need to ensure that I get all my pieces in the game. Queen to e5 was played. Doesn't do much, to be honest. Because I'm trying to trade, let's play queen g5. Queen c7 was also fine. But actually, I don't mind doubling up the pawns like this because it makes f4 a harder move for him to play. And he shouldn't want to trade queens, by the way, but I'm also attacking his pawn on g4, so it was hard for him not to trade. And then from here, I'm just going to play g6. Okay, I knew he wanted to go for this idea, which is why I have to play g6 to ensure that his bishop is not doing anything. And then from here, I need to just continue to get the rest of the pieces in the game. Now, I'm going to play rook to e8 because eventually I want to just advance my majority. For example, rook e5 hits the pawn, but now I'm able to play f6, guard the pawn, attack the rook. My pawn on g7 is hanging. He's not able to take it just yet, but once he moves away his rook, I'm going to get enough time to move my king to guard the pawn. And then he plays rook to h3, trying to play rook to h7, but I'm able to play rook to h8, and he doesn't want to trade. So I basically have full control over the h file and the c file, the only two files on the board. Okay, so rook to f3. Let's play e5. Now I'm threatening to fork, just advancing the pawns. I want to play king to e6 followed by f5 as well. This is some endgame technique that I'm about to display, by the way. One thing to keep in mind when it comes to the endgame is patience. You have to be patient in the endgame. So he moves the rook, pawn to e4. Okay, this is just a removing the guard tactic. Like the rook attacks the pawn on c2, the bishop guards it. So pawn to e4 hits the bishop, force the bishop to move, and then we just grab the free pawn on c2. And then once the c2 pawn hangs, b2 and a3 may fall with it. Okay, so he moves the bishop, and as we said, that's another pawn. And then he's trading the rooks. Like, it's crazy. Like, if you guys don't learn anything, this is what you need to learn. Like, if you're down by so many material, why are you going out of your way to trade the pieces off the board? Now it's so easy for me to roll the pawns up the board. Okay, so now he plays f3. Let's just play d3 to hit the bishop. And then once the bishop move, I'll play, well, he resigns. More Sicilian defense against 1100 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1100. Let's play some more Sicilian defense. Knight f3. Let's play d6 this time around. Just to show you guys that you can play both e6, then d6, d6, then e6. Doesn't really matter. Bishop c4. Now I'll play a6. So he's basically trying to play an Italian versus the Sicilian, which is not usually advised because, okay, first we have to play e6 so the bishop doesn't come in. But there's a lot of times where I could just play b5. For example, now he plays d4. I'm going to play b5 first, chasing away the bishop. Now he has to pull the bishop back. Then I take on d4. And this is why it's not really good to play the Italian versus the Sicilian. So once the bishop moves, let's just take. I'm expecting him to play knight takes, and then from here it's just a matter of development and getting our regular hedgehog setup. Queen takes was played, surprising move, because now he's allowing me to play knight c6, and that's a tempo on his queen. But the thing is, it's kind of weird because now he pulls his queen back, and he's forcing me to block out my bishop. But let's play knight f6 and continue my development. And by the way, if you want to play against me, just drop a username in the chat with the ratings, and I'll shoot you a message. Now, knight c3. Everybody blunders a pawn like this. The knight attacks the pawn on e4. The knight guards the pawn on e4. We play pawn to b5, removing the guard. Now he has to move the knight. We take the pawn on e4. Just like that, we're already ahead by a pawn. So he pulls the knight all the way to the back rank. Let's take the free pawn. The good thing about this, it's very solid. So even though his king is out the center and my king is in the center, there's no way for him to like do a lot of pawn breaks to keep my king in the center. Bishop to f4 was played, okay, applying some pressure to d6, but d6 is heavily guarded, so let's just continue with our development here. Knight to d2, okay. I mean, I'm ahead in material, so I don't mind trading pieces off the board, and then once he takes, I just get my king out the center of the board. Now, what he needs to do from here is to finish the development of his rooks, because his minor pieces are already developed, so he needs to get his major pieces now in the game. Bishop to... Okay, bishop to d3. Very suspicious looking, because if I could get a pawn on e4, that would be good. I'm not seeing how I'm going to do it though. But I'm still going to play e5 because I wasn't able to put my bishop on b7. Well, I could still do it, but the knight blocks it. So instead, I'm going to put the bishop on e6 and then eventually play pawn to d5. So now I think he needs to pull the bishop to g3. If he pulls it back to e3, pawn d5 is very strong. If he pulls it back to g3 and I play pawn d5, he's able to win my pawn on e5. Okay, for one, I didn't even consider that being a move, but I didn't see it. I mean, it's important that you look on the opponent's forcing move, but this just doesn't work. It's just a free bishop. Like, there's no Greek gifts, sacrifices, or anything. Like, my knight is unprotected, but I mean, okay, that doesn't do anything. Now I'm just going to put the king back on g8, and his bishop is still under attack. So you don't just sacrifice pieces just to check someone's king. You want to get a real attack. I'm not just ahead by an entire piece from a piece that he gifted to me. Okay, now he plays queen c4. He's hitting my knight. I mean, I should not have an issue trading pieces. I'm the one who's ahead in material. So let's just grab the knight. He takes my knight, I take his. That's fine. He's attacking my rook though. But what I'm going to do is play rook to b8 because I want to be able to play bishop b7, hit the queen, and then if the queen moves, I take the knight, double up his pawns, and then he could lose the game like that. I mean, he could lose the game anyways because he's down by a piece. Okay, so he got his rook in the game. The plan was to play bishop b7, hitting the queen, and then once he moves the queen, we give up the bishop for a knight, but we're also exposing his king. So that's the whole idea. Queen to c4. Okay, let's give up the bishop for the knight. Then once he takes, okay, this pawn is under attack. And I'm not going to defend it. Let's play bishop to f6, attacking this pawn. I don't really want that pawn though. I kind of want him to take here. So that way, once I play bishop e5, I'm already attacking his queen. And then I could play rook b5 to get the rest of my pieces in the game. So that's what I'm trying to do. Now I'm trying to start a checkmating attack on his king because his king is exposed. He has to be careful where he puts the queen. I was about to say if I was him, I would keep the queen close to the king, but guy decided to just outright give me the queen. Like, that's crazy. Now I'm threatening mate on h2. Whoa. And the opponent resigns. More Sicilian defense against 1,200 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,200. Let's play some more Sicilian defense. Okay, knight f3. Let's go d6 this time around. And after pawn d4, we take. And after knight takes, we're going to play a6 because we're trying to play the hedgehog variation of the Sicilian. Knight c3, we play knight f6. This is very similar to the Najdorf, by the way. Pawn to e5 would be the Najdorf. I'm going to be coming with a Najdorf video very, very soon. Now he plays pawn to g3 with the idea of playing bishop g2 and pawn to e4, e5, which is very strong. Yeah, like fianchettoing the bishop like this against the Shevin engine could do something. But let's see. Let's still play. I'm going to play b5 this time around. So there's a lot of times where you could choose between playing b6 or b5 depending on the scenario. But when you play b5, it's more aggressive because you're threatening ideas of hitting the knight, winning this pawn. So bishop to g2. Now we play bishop to b7. And at least he's not able to push the pawn just now. But we have to be looking at a lot of variations where he could possibly push the pawn. Okay, he castled the king. And the funny thing is, pawn to b4 doesn't win the pawn because if pawn b4, there's knight d5. So first I'm going to play pawn e6. And again, if he pushes the pawn, I first take the bishop, then I take the pawn. So that's fine. And because the pawn is still on the c file and the rook is not able to get to c1, my queen does very well on the c7 square. Now, maybe I should have played bishop to e7 because now he's able to take and double up my pawns. Which would be very annoying, by the way, but at least I'll have the bishop here. Rook c1 was such a bad move. I think he's trying to play defensive or something, guard his c pawn or something. I'm not sure. But let's play knight d7 and continue with the plan. Now I'm supporting my knight, which means b4 could be a real threat now. And then I could go bishop e7 and just castle. So he saw that, and then he decides to play pawn to a3. And let's just go bishop e7 and castle. It's a very similar setup. The difference is the pawn is not on b6. The pawn is on b5. That's the difference. But with the pawn on b5, I also have plans of playing knight b6 to c4 or knight e5 to c4. So he pulls the knight back. Not sure why he would do that. You know, look what the funny thing is. The guy literally just played a3 so that way I don't attack his knight, forcing him to pull the knight back. And then I played bishop e7 and he still pulled the knight back. No, that's a drawback mistake because he only has one piece guarding the pawn. I have two pieces guard attacking the pawn. So now I'm just going to take the free pawn. And I'm going to choose to take with the bishop. If he takes, I takes, and then if he takes on e7, I play king takes. Slightly risky because my king is in the center of the board, but I am ahead by a pawn. It's like most of these games that I'm playing, they're just hanging the e4 pawn, and then he plays f3, which is blocking in his bishop. Let's just pull back to b7. Now I could say I have a better bishop than him, and I didn't even had to my king in the center of the board, and I'm still ahead by the pawn. So now I'm just gonna castle pawn c3. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. I could play h6. I could play rook c8. I could play rook e8, and that's the whole plan of the edge hug. So queen to d7. I'm also trying to put a knight on c4. Okay, first I'm going to play knight e5 though. I want to play knight c4 to hit the queen. I'm also trying to play h6. If I play h6 and the bishop goes back to e3, knight c4 is also going to be even better. He may play b3 to try to prevent my knight from going to c4, but in some cases I should be able to play d5 and then target his pawn on e3. Knight f4, weird move. Okay, I think he's trying to sack on e6, which is not a terrible idea. So knight takes e6, pawn takes e6, knight takes e6. Okay, here's what I'm going to do because I noticed that both of the knights are adjacent to each other like this. And if I had a pawn on e5, that would be a fork. So I'm still going to play knight c4, hit the queen. And then I may play pawn to e5. Now, the funny thing is, once I play pawn to e5, he's still able to play knight e6. But then I take, and then once he forks, I just move my queen. And I don't mind if he takes my rook. In some cases, I'm able to check him, by the way, and not give him the rook. But even if I have to give him the rook, the two knights are better than the rooks. So he moves the queen. Okay, now if I play e5, he's able to play knight f5. And if I take the knight, he takes my bishop. So e5 doesn't work. With that being said, let's just play rook to e8 first. Let's play rook to e8 first. We're still not afraid of any sacrificial ideas. I mean, takes, queen takes, I just move. Takes, knight takes, I just check with the queen. Okay, so he finally decides to just pull back the knight, but I'm afraid to say that was actually a blunder. Now, why is this a blunder? Hopefully, you're able to see it. But having an exposed king like this could be crucial, especially when you have an unprotected piece. So, unprotected bishop, exposed king, hit him with queen to c5. Check the king, hit the unprotected bishop. Once he moves the king or block the check, we're just going to take the bishop, and black is just winning here. So he puts the knight back on e5, which means I can also PP on the PP. But let's just take the free bishop. Because it's a free bishop. It's a free 3 points. Pawn to e5 is also going to be a pin. Well, a fork. So he has to be careful there. Okay, rook to c2. We have two pieces adjacent to each other like this, which means that has to be a fork. Just trying to ensure that I'm not trapping my queen. For example, pawn e5, pawn h4, I take. Rook c2 didn't do anything. So pawn e5 is just a fork. Yeah, this guy's just dropping all the pieces. Let's just assume that it was a slip and he wanted to pull the knight back to c2. Okay, okay, knight d5. I guess he's like, I'm gonna lose the knight anyways. Let's just allow him to take it because maybe he thinks I'll take his knight, then he'll take my bishop. Maybe that's what he's saying. Or maybe he wants to play f4. So I'm gonna take with the bishop. If he plays f4, I'm still able to take, and my knight and my queen guards my bishop. I'm now just ahead by 2 pieces, 7 whole point. And then he pulls his knight back, which means I'm able to win even more material. This is crazy. Okay, well, not really. What I'm going to do is play queen e3, which checks the king. And if he takes, then I fork and then hit the knight. He shouldn't take, but because I'm ahead by 7 points, I'm just trying to trade the pieces off the board. And he did take. Let's just take back. That's a fork, plus the knight is hanging. I'm not gonna lie. For 1200, I expect way better for 1200, bro. To be honest. Rook e2. Now we just grab. He moves the king. He also puts his king on the same diagonal as his rook on a light square. But I'm actually not gonna play bishop c4 because if I pin the rook and then take the rook, I'm actually getting 2 points of material. But taking the knight is an entire 3 points of material. Then he plays f4. Yes, he's attacking my rook, but now I'm able to pin your rook, bro. Come on, bro. And now once he takes, I take back. And then once I take his rook, I just have three pieces that time ahead. So now I'm just gonna take all his pawns, promote my pawn to a queen, and then checkmate his king. So let's just start by getting this rook into the game. And well, the opponent resigns. More Shevin engine against 1300 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1300. Let's play some Sicilian defense. Knight f3. And the good thing about this line is it doesn't really matter if you play e6 first or d6 first. It's going to transpose. Just ensure that you know the setup. Like the setup is actually more important than anything. So pawn d4, we're going to be taking on d4. And then after knight takes d4, we're going to be playing a6. And I know you guys think that I'm playing the Sicilian can with, queen c7, knight f6, knight c6. But this is not the Sicilian can. It's just the hedgehog is very flexible. We could use the hedgehog to play the Sicilian can, but after the move knight to c3, we're going to play the move pawn to d6. And this is how we know that we're going to be playing the hedgehog version of the Sicilian. So bishop e3 was played. Let's go knight f6, just knowing the setup, knowing where the pieces belong. Bishop goes to e7, king is castled, pawn goes to b6, bishop b7, knight d7, rook c8, queen c7, queen b8. Like knowing the setup, and then like let's say you know the setup, and then you know like 2 or 3 plans. That's actually all you need. So he plays bishop to e3. He's just developing, very normal development move. Let's play bishop to e7. And the whole idea of the hedgehog is we're basically going to be putting our pawns on the 6th rank. We're not necessarily going to be moving the pawns past the 6th rank just yet. So queen to d2 was played, and again, the setup is the important thing. So what if I play b6? What if I play knight d7? What if I castle? It doesn't really matter a lot. I could play b6, bishop b7, then castle. I could castle, then play b6, bishop b7. I could play knight d7, then castle. Once you put the pieces on the squares where you know the pieces belong, then you'll be playing the hedgehog. So he decides to castle on the king side. Let's play the move pawn to b6. And if you're a fan of just outplaying people, then this is very good for you because it's super aggressive, but it does not start aggressive. So you basically start off by having no weaknesses. Knight went back to f3, and I think the outplaying process has begun because the move knight to f3 doesn't appear to do much. I guess he wants to play pawn to e5. So let's just start by putting the knight on d7 before we put the bishop on b7. And basically what we're trying to say is, hey, if you if any pieces cross our half of the board, then you will be getting the spikes. So rook to d1, he's getting his pieces in the game. Let's play bishop b7, and then we're going to play queen c7 and rook to c8. So as we said, here's the setup that you need to know. How you get into the setup, it doesn't matter too much. So pawn to a3, again, can I play queen c7 before I play rook c8? Of course. Can I play rook c8 before I play queen c7? Of course. But let's start with queen c7. For example, I could play rook c8 first, but because I'm leaving a6 a bit weak, maybe he could play something like queen e2. Those are the little stuff that I'm thinking about here. But eventually, our plan is to play rook c8, and then there's different ideas. There's king h8, rook g8, pawn g5, pawn g4. Okay, knight to e2, and it already happened. He didn't try to play too aggressive, and because he didn't try to play too aggressive, he got outplayed and then he blundered his pawn. But if he tried to play aggressive, he would have gotten stung. So why is this a mistake? First thing we want to do is we want to check to see what the knight is doing. The knight on c3 was guarding e4. It was one of the main defenders of e4. It's no longer guarding e4, which means he made a drawback mistake. And because I already have two pieces attacking his pawn on e4, I'm just winning a pawn here. Two attackers, one defender. Let's just take on e4. This guy's 1300, by the way, and literally what I did was just played the setup. So again, if you're one of those persons who blunder a lot, this is gonna be very good for you. Now I'm attacking his pawn on c2 twice, and again, I have no weaknesses. Like you could get to the first 15, 16, 17 moves in the hedgehog just off the plans alone. Okay, now he plays knight g5. I mean, I was attacking the pawn on c2 twice. Guys didn't even try to guard the pawn, which is crazy. So we have no weaknesses, so we're chilling. I mean, and if you guys want to quote me and say that the c6 square is weak, then that's fine. I don't consider c6 to be a weakness, even though it can't be guarded by a pawn. But because we're now ahead by a pawn, why not just grab c2 and be ahead by two pawns? If knight takes bishop, we take. We're still ahead by two pawns. That's winning. If queen takes, we takes, hit the rook. And if the rook gets the file, then we just need to come back and then pin the knight. And then he has to spend a move guarding the knight. And then we're going to now challenge the file. So a second pawn it is, outplaying people with the hedgehog Sicilian. So queen takes was played. Let's just take, hit the rook. And then once the rook goes here, okay, I actually didn't see that even if I go bishop d3, which pins the knight to the rook, he could still move his rook to c7. I mean, it doesn't hurt a lot though, but it would have just been a trick. But now that he plays rook to e1, now I'm just gonna challenge the file. Does it matter which rook I use? Nah, but let's use the f rook. Let's just use the f rook since it's really, really not doing anything. This rook is also not doing anything, but he took on c8, which is also bad, guys. Like to take is a mistake. We know this. And then he played knight to f4. I mean, I'm gonna consider knight to f4 to be another mistake, even though he's not necessarily losing the knight. Why I'm going to consider this to be a mistake is because the guy's down by two pawns. He shouldn't try to be trading the pieces off the board. And I'm sure he just didn't see that his knight is pinning, so his knight is hanging. So I'm still going to call it a drawback mistake because the bishop no longer guards the knight, but my bishop will be hanging in the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the knight, he takes my bishop, I take his bishop, and then once he takes, we're just playing the hedgehog endgame with no weaknesses, ahead by two pawns. So let's grab the knight. He grabs my bishop, I grab his bishop, and then now he needs to take. Maybe he thinks his back rank is weak. It's not. Nice. And from here, we're just going to be putting our rook on his second rank, rook to c2. So my d6 pawn now is unprotected. So king f8, king e7 is a very nice plan. And now we're just going to be playing, we're just going to be beating him in the endgame, basically. What are the plans in the endgame? Because I'm sure that you guys know by now that these opening videos that I'm dropping, I'm trying to teach you guys the opening, but it's not just the opening alone. I'm trying to teach you guys chess. Okay, knight b4 is actually a move. Definitely a move. Knight b4, if I grab the pawn, he grabs my pawn, and that's trading pawns in the endgame. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Instead of playing a5, let's play knight c5 because I'm trying to trade. I'm ahead in my T-roll. Because now if he still decides to play knight b4 to fork my rook and my pawn, the knight on c5 guards the pawn. And this is also me trying to do a removing the guard tactic because let's say he doesn't want to trade and he moves his knight away, then he's still going to be losing the pawn. So he took. How do we take back? Not 100% sure. If I take like this, I'm assuming he's going to try to play rook to d3, threatening some mate. I push the pawn, and then I'm fine. If I take like this, there's still rook d3, and I push this pawn, and then I'm fine. So let's just take with the d pawn. One thing I've learned from Igor Smirnov is in the opening and the middle game, you try to take towards the center. In the end game, you take away from the center. Not that he played rook to e2, like you guys know exactly what I'm about to say, right? And if you don't know what I'm about to say, then you haven't been watching my video. Let me say exactly what I always say when I see people doing this. The only reason, not the only reason, but the main reason why people say you should trade pieces off the board is for this exact purpose. You shouldn't be down by a pawn or two and then trade the last piece off the board. It's just mathematically losing. Now here's what I'm gonna do though. Instead of taking the rook this way and then he plays king takes, I'm actually gonna check and then take the rook this way. It doesn't matter too much, but to me, it seems as if his king is gonna take just a bit longer to join the game. But it doesn't matter too much because the king being well, it kind of does matter because the king on e1 is not able to get to d3, but the king on e2 is able to get to d3. Now, what's the exact plan that I'm going to use to win this mathematically winning king and pawn endgame? He blocks with the rook. Let's take the rook. We're going to be using a technique called fox in the chicken coop. Hopefully, you guys know how it works. We're going to be creating a pass pawn on one side of the board, force the opponent's king to run to that side and run to the other side and grab all his pawns. Step one, however, is to centralize the king. It's just optimize the pieces. And it's the same thing in the middle game. And that's why understanding your end game will actually help you to be a very good strategic player in the middle game. Because before you even start pushing up pawns, before you start doing any pawn storms, it's very important that your pieces are on good scores. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run my king as close as possible to the center of the board first. And then once I run my king towards the center of the board, then I'm going to start optimizing my pawn. So king up, let's play king up, just centralizing the king. I'm not gonna lie, this was a textbook beat. Like this 1300 got textbook beat. It didn't really take a lot of effort. It was just knowing the setup, spotting his blunders, punishing his blunders. Pawn a4, let's play king d5. Now that our king is centralized, what is step two? We're not going to be advancing the pawns. Not necessarily to create the pass pawn just yet, because first we want to ensure that all the pawns are fixed and then we start. But let's play the move b5 first, especially since it's 3 versus 2. We're also trying to ensure that we advance our pawn majority. Now, after I play b5, you may see me push these pawns up the board, just trying to ensure that the pawns are fixed on both sides. Then it's going to put his king in zugzwang. He's going to be in a situation where he's forced to move the king away, and then my king is going to be able to enter into his position. So pawn to b3 was played. Okay, it's actually making it way easier for me because now I'm actually able to do the whole fox and the chicken coop technique without even pushing up my pawns. Because now that he plays b3, I'm able to play pawn c4 and check his king. And then if he takes, I takes, and we already have the pass pawn. He didn't take though, but I'm still going to be taking on b3. And now that he takes, anytime he takes, I'm going to take back. But I'm actually going to play the move king to c5 so that way after takes, he's not able to attack my pawn. And then I'm now just going to be rolling my pawn up the board. And in a lot of scenarios, I can also force his king in like a stalemate scenario and force him to sacrifice his pawns, and then I quit. So he took, let's take back. And then he starts to move the pawns. So because he starts to move the pawn, it's going to be making it easier for me to fix his pawns. If he hasn't been moving the pawns, then it would have been a bit hard. So let's just move our pawns up the board so that way his pawn is going to be eventually fixed. And because I'm ahead by 2 pawns, I can also create a pass pawn on this side. Now that he moves away his king, we're able to move our king forward, taking the opposition. And the opponent resigns. More Hedgehog Sicilian against 1,400 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,400. More Sicilian coming your way. Knight f3, let's play d6. d4 we take, and then after knight takes, we play knight f6, hit the pawn. Now, after knight c3, pawn to a6 is actually the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian, which is way more aggressive than the Scheveningen or the Hedgehog. I'm going to be doing a video on that one very soon. But after bishop to g5, instead of playing something like, and then queen, after bishop g5, queen b6 in the Najdorf would be the poison pawn variation. But let's not go in that territory just yet. That's for another video. Let's play e6 and do our regular Scheveningen stuff. So bishop to e2, we go bishop e7. He castles his king. I'll also castle my king. And then he plays queen to d7. Am I able to sacrifice on e4? No, that doesn't work. That will never work because he plays knight takes. So let's play knight d7. Let's just finish our development. Queen goes to c7, pawn goes to b6 or b5, depending on your plan. Like b6 followed by bishop b7 is just very solid, but you can also play b5, b4, trying to win the e4 pawn. So rook e1, we play queen c7. Very simple setup. Then b6, bishop b7, or b5, bishop b7. Rook to d1. Okay, guys, getting all his pieces in the game. Let's do the same. Pawn b5, bishop b7 is the idea. I'm assuming he's going to play a3, preventing b4. Otherwise, I'm just going to be winning a pawn. And then after a3, we play bishop b7. Okay, he plays bishop to d3, which is also fine because now all his pieces are guarding e4. So let's just continue with bishop b7. That's more attackers on e4, by the way. Knight c5 will also add more attackers on e4. There's also knight e5 to c4, which is an idea. Knight b6 to c4. There's rook c8, rook d8, h6 to chase away his bishop. All of these are the plans. Okay, he finally plays a3. Let's get the rest of our pieces in the game first, though. Let's play rook to c8 because rooks needs files. And a lot of time this rook goes to e8. Sometimes it goes to d8, sometimes it goes to e8. It all depends on your plans. But there's a plan where we could play rook e8, queen b8, bishop d8, bishop c7, pawn d5. That's also a plan. And then this helps us to attack h2. And then once we play d5, it allows us to take back with the knight or the bishop. And then we get very, very strong position. So I may play with this plan based on what he does. Okay, so knight went back to f3. Let's continue with the plan. Let's play rook to e8. Okay, so he pulls his bishop back to e3. Let's continue with the plan. Let's go queen to b8. I want to outplay him. I want to see if I create a plan and then he creates a plan. Let's see what plan he's going to create because you guys already know what my plan is. Bishop d8, bishop c7, pawn to d5. There's also times where you could play queen to a8, knight c5, and then you're just applying so much pressure to the e4 pawn. Okay, he plays pawn to a4, which is very surprising because he only has two defender on e4. Okay, I guess if I play b4, there's knight a2. This is one reason why the pawn is fine on b6, by the way. But I think I'm still gonna go for it. Let's go b4, knight a2, takes, and then I'm assuming he's gonna take with the knight. So knight a2. If I play a5, I'm okay. If I play a5 and he plays c3, a5, this is now under attack. So if I play a5, what is he gonna play to defend this? Maybe bishop f4. If I takes, he gives up the, no, if I takes, there's also queen takes. Well, let's go for this line. Let's take, since it's a central pawn, it should be okay trading a central pawn for a flank pawn. If he takes with the queen, even pawn d5 could hit the queen. He decided to give up the bishop here, and his pawn on c2 is also under a lot of pressure here. So I'm expecting him to take with the knight, hit this pawn, and then I play a5, hit the knight, and then he has to play knight to d3. Knight is the only defender of b2, but then if I takes, he has pawn takes. So not bad plan that he just chose, but I'm still very solid in the center. So knight takes, this is under attack. So let's play a5, hit the knight. And then once he moves the knight, my pawn on a5 is also going to be under attack. So knight d3, I'm expecting. And if I takes, he has pawn takes. So after knight d3, I'm going to play bishop to d8, guarding the pawn. And then the bishop could go to c7. And then I could play d5 with the same plan. Oh, wait, aren't I able to just take on f3? I didn't even see that. Yeah, let's just take on f3. Exposing his king, giving up the bishop for the knight though. But no bishop to d8, guard the pawn. And then I could even start attacking him on the king side. Now, whenever you have an exposed king like this, you should play king h1, rook g1. So he plays b3. Now I want to put my bishop back to f6 so that way I can play bishop here. But that will not work. So let's just play queen to b7 here, attacking the unprotected pawn. Okay, queen to e2 guards the pawn. How do we continue our attack here? Now, based on what I'm seeing, this pawn on c2 is also weak. You need to double up on the c file. Maybe just queen c6 first. Let's play queen c6 first and attack c2. Let's see how he defends c2. Maybe rook c1 and then I try bishop f6 or bishop b6. I don't think the bishop c7 idea is any useful anymore because I already did what I wanted to do. I already exposed his king. Okay, so he plays rook c1. Pawn c4 could be an idea. So let's play d5 so he's not able to play c4. Well, he's actually still able to play c4. What am I saying? Okay, he moves the king out the way. So he's trying to play rook to g8, which is the correct plan. Okay, let's play e5 because maybe he's going to actually try to attack me on the king side. So it's very important that I try to counter in the center of the board. Okay, bishop back to d2 was played. I mean, I should still be able to play e4, hit the knight, and then once the knight moves, e3, discovered attack. Oh, but then my rooks aren't connected, so that's going to be an issue. So e5 hits the knight, takes, knight move. e4, check. He blocks the check, and then I'm not able to do anything. So before I do that, I have to ensure that my rooks are connected. So let's play bishop b6 and target f2. Now I'm threatening e4. Okay, so he decides to play c4. If I play e5, he takes. Queen is under attack. If I take, okay, that's not going to work. If I take, I'm helping his rook to be active. So let's play d4. Okay, my bishop isn't really the best, to be honest. Pawn c5 could be something. Should be able to take, though. And his pawn on f3 now is definitely a weakness. I'm also thinking of rook e6, rook f6 to apply pressure to his weak f3 pawn. Okay, good move. Queen d5. He's trying to trade. I don't think I should trade because it undoubles his pawn. What if I play knight f6? That shouldn't work. I think his queen is in a compromising position anyways because I should be able to play knight f6 or something. So let's just move the queen. For example, queen to e6. I can play f5. I can play knight f6. I can even try knight c5. Don't think the queen belongs there. Yeah, he's really trying to trade queens. Can't trade queens and undouble his pawns unless I'm able to play e4 next. And it does something. So e4, let's say he moves the knight somewhere and I play e3. And then he takes and I takes. The bishop goes there. I don't have anything. So let's play f5, hit the queen. And it's also going to make e4 way more dangerous, followed by e3. So because this king is unsafe, I'm trying to keep the queens on the board. And I'm also not trying to undouble his pawn. So pawn to e4 is kind of weird to me. But I may play pawn e4 if I'm sure that I'm getting an attack from it. Okay, queen to g5. Push takes. There's knight here. I want to go back to... If I go back, then he takes. I go here, then he goes here. That's weird. All right, let's attack the queen. Let's pull the bishop back to d8 and attack the queen. My bishop needs to stay guarding this pawn, and I don't want to disconnect my rooks. So queen moves to g3. He has 3 attackers. I have 3 defenders. If I push, the knight is always going to go here. This rook isn't really doing much. So let's play rook to b8 and then target this pawn. I think he's able to play knight f4, and if I take, he takes. And then if I takes, he takes. And that's because my rook is not connected. So I need to reconnect my rooks. But for now, I'm attacking his pawn. He threatens a checkmate. So let's just play bishop f6 to guard the mate. My rooks are now connected. This is hanging, by the way, but this is also hanging. Well, now he plays knight f4, but I'm able to take, bro. I think the time pressure is getting to him now. That's just a piece. What? Bishop takes. Now I'm able to take on g3. That's another pawn. And if he puts one other rook on e1, I'm just going to sack my queen because 2 rooks are, in fact, better than a queen. So let's take, because I have 2 pieces attacking. He only has the rook guarding. So let's take. After rook takes, I check. And then after king up, I play rook b1, and I'm threatening to win his queen with rook to g1. So he saw that, moves his king. The issue is I'm still going to play rook g1, and his queen is just trapped. Like his queen has nowhere to go. So this is GG's. Okay, so he decides to sack the queen. Let's just take. Now I have him in a little mating net. I'm trying to play g5, g4. That's going to be leading to a checkmate. He moves the bishop, pawn g5, and then once I play g4, he's going to be mated. I think he has to sack his bishop here. Pawn to f4, but now all I need, well, he resigns. More 7 engine against 1500 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1500. Let's play some more. 7 engine. What flag is this? Fiji, I didn't know that. Okay, knight to f3. Let's play e6. Maybe he's going to play d4, and we're going to get a very nice 7 engine type of setup. And then after knight takes, we're going to play a6. And this is not us playing the Sicilian Khan, by the way. You guys have probably watched my Sicilian Khan video. I'm playing the hedgehog setup. So after knight d4, yes, we're going to play a6. And the queen still goes to c7. So the funny thing is, I could even start by putting the... Look at this. I'm going to play queen c7. And it looks so similar to the Khan, right? This is actually what I taught you guys about the Khan. And then after queen c7, I also told you guys to play knight to f6. And I could do all of this and still play d6, bishop e7, and transpose it into the 7 engine. So now he plays g3. Hopefully he's not going to blunder and try to attack my queen because that's going to be an obvious fork. But let's just continue with our development here. Let's play knight to f6. I'm still playing it like a Sicilian can, by the way, but I'm just going to switch it up on him. So if you know how to play both the Sicilian can and the Sicilian hedgehog, then you could be playing both of them at the same time. So bishop to g7 was played, and now if I play b6, there's e5, and then I'm going to be losing my rook on a8. So that's actually a very nice idea, and it's a very cool way to play against the Sicilian. Now, bishop to b4 is what I would usually play. For example, I'm going to play bishop e7 just because I'm doing the hedgehog and I want you guys to understand the plans of the hedgehog. But if you play both the hedgehog and the can, you could start it off like a can. So if they play certain stuff, you're able to hit them with certain moves. And if they don't do certain stuff, then you just transpose it into your regular hedgehog. So let's go bishop e7, castle, pawn e6, knight d7. He castle, I'm also going to castle. And then he plays rook to e1. The purpose of rook to e1 is to play e5. That's why we're going to play pawn d6. And it's tricky. It's actually very tricky. I'm just never able to push my b pawn to and get to my bishop. The moment I push my b pawn, he plays e5, and that's just a nice move. Discovered attack. So I'm gonna have to figure out what I'm gonna do there. Maybe knight d7, and then rook a7, and then push the pawn, and then put my bishop on b7 could be a plan. Pawn to f4 was played, which means he really wants to play pawn to e5. That's fine though. Like once I play knight e7, as we said, where for one, when you play the hedgehog, if a piece cross your half of the board, then they're gonna get spiked. But you also make it hard for them to make pieces cross your half of the board. Because now playing knight d7 kind of prevents e5. Now I need to figure out what's the plan with my light squared bishop. And because the bishop is on the same diagonal as my rook, I don't want to push this due to this. So what I said before is rook a7, but if I play rook a7, he plays bishop e3, and then the bishop is on the same diagonal as my rook. So maybe I should play rook b8, and then b5, and then put the bishop on b7. And then by then he's probably going to blunder. So he did play bishop e3, and here we're going to play rook to b8, b5, and he actually needs to play pawn to g4 here. Like whenever you have these types of scenarios, you don't necessarily want to play e5 to hit the knight, but you want to play g4. And what I've learned is whenever someone plays g4, it's usually good that you're able to meet g4 with d5. In this scenario, I'm not able to play d5. And if you're not able to play d5, then g4, g5 is going to be annoying. Now he decides to play queen to e2. Now I'm going to play pawn to b5. And the plan is to basically put the bishop on b7 and apply a lot of pressure to his pawn on e4. So he plays a3 to prevent b5. But the whole idea was actually to put my bishop on d7. And now we still kind of get the Chevy Ninja hedgehog type setup. We're applying a lot of pressure to his pawn here, pulling the bishop back to f2, perfectly guards the pawn. And the good thing about this is all we need to do now is think about, do we want to play e5 or d5? So those are like the middle game plans. It's also important that we get to a rook in the game. There's also a very nice plan that I didn't mention, where you could play bishop to d8, queen to b8, bishop to c7, and then pawn to d5, so that way you could start some attack on this diagonal. So once you understand all of these plans, you should be chilling. Now pawn e5 takes will hit my knight, and my knight will be forced to move, so I have to be careful. With that being said, what if I play knight c5 or knight, no, I like knight b6 here actually. Because what knight b6 does is if he plays e5, I'm able to get the d7 square for my knight eventually. But a knight on b6 also targets his weakness. Well, it's not a weakness, it's a secondary weakness. I've learned that the real definition of a weakness is a pawn or a square that can't be guarded by another pawn. So if a square is not currently guarded by another pawn, it's a secondary weakness. And the reason why I say it's a secondary weakness is because if he tries to play b3 to guard the square, then it creates a weakness. So now he plays e5. Do we just take first? Takes, queen takes, bishop d6 hits the queen, takes pawn, takes knight back, and then his pawn on e5 becomes very weak. Takes, yeah, let's just take. If he takes with the queen, that's a tempo. And if he takes with the pawn, it's a weakness because it can't be guarded by a pawn. It becomes an overexerted, isolated pawn. Now, advanced pawns are usually good for the attacker and bad for the defender. So If he really uses this pawn the right way and use it to attack me, then it could be good. But if I defend it or I attack that pawn the right way, then it could be bad. So let's pull the knight back to d7. That was the whole idea. If he takes on b7, then I'm just going to take back. That's fine. Maybe I'm going to take with the rook though and not the queen, because I want to apply as much pressure to e5 as possible. For example, knight c4 hits b7 and also targets e5. And it happens, guys. Mr. 1500 plays b3 to prevent my knight from going to c4, but this is a drawback blunder. And I want to talk to you guys about something very important, very, very important. Do I take the bishop first? No, because if I take the bishop, he gets the chance to sack his knight. So I'm just going to take the knight, and if he takes, I take back. Now, here's something that I've been telling my students a lot, and I'm actually planning on making a video specifically for this. And this is something that I made, so don't quote me on it and don't try to research it or something. There's 3 levels of blunders, and this is what I think. Maybe there's 4. Maybe if I think about it, there's 5. But to me, there's 3 levels of blunders. There's the level 1 blunder, which is where you put a piece on a square. Now, here are the examples of the level 1 blunder. I don't really know how to define them as yet. I'm going to come up with a definition soon. Maybe you could help me with this. But the examples of level 1 blunder is you put a square on a piece that the opponent is guarding, and then the opponent just take it, or the opponent attacks one of your pieces, you didn't see it, and then the opponent just take it. Those are examples of level 1 blunders. They threaten a checkmate, you missed it, and then you lost the game. That's level 1. Level 2 blunders are what just happened just now, like the drawback principle. It's not really the easiest thing to see, but if you just think about what was my piece doing, then you would have seen it. And then level 2 blunders could also be counting type of blunders. So for example, if I have 2 pieces on a square and you have 1 piece on the square, but you still put the piece on the square, that's also a level 2 blunder. And let me make my move before I say level 3 blunder. Okay, I'm ahead by a piece, so the goal is just to start trading. Knight back, I'm going to play bishop c5 and just get the bishops off the board. There's also no way for him to attack my queen, so my queen is not going to get trapped. Okay, back to the discussion. What's a level 3 blunder? My definition of a level 3 blunder is like tactical blunders. And what I've been telling my students is level 3 blunders where it becomes a skill issue. Personally speaking, let's just stay back with check. I don't think a level 1 blunder is a skill issue. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, unless you're just a complete beginner in chess, then it's a skill issue, and that's fine. Let's just put this rook on the file. There's 2 pieces now attacking the pawn. So if you're a complete beginner and you put a piece on a square that the opponent is guarding and you just didn't see it, then that's fine. It's a skill issue. But based on my experience, a lot of persons make level 1 blunder and it's not a skill issue. It's a focus issue. So sometimes you're just not focusing. Even some level 2 blunders could be focus issue as well. The level 3 blunder is where the skill issue comes in, where, okay, the guy just played a very nice tactic and you just genuinely didn't see it, and that's fine. If for example, this is just skill issue. It's kind of like, and that's the thing, I'm still working on this, but there's also in between. There's something in between level 1 and level 2. There's something in between level 3 and level 2 and level 3. And I'm just trying to break it down so that way it's more simpler for you guys. So for example, he just made a drawback mistake. The rook was covering the pawn on e5, but now it's no longer covering the pawn on e5. I can't necessarily call this a level 2 because it's a tactic that is going to help me to win the pawn, but I can't really call it a level 3 because it's a drawback. You get what I'm saying? So it's between level 2 and level 3. And basically what I'm saying is because the rook is no longer guarding the pawn and I have 2 pieces attacking the pawn, I'm just going to remove the guard. And for the person who's going to say bishops are better than knights, you're fine, that's correct. But a pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. And I'm ahead by a piece. So I'm still trying to trade pieces off the board. And that's why instead of taking with the knight, I'm going to take with the queen, because I'm still trying to trade the pieces off the board. And from here, I'm just ahead by 4 points, an entire piece and a pawn. So you play the Shevin engine and these types of hedgehog type of setup, persons blunder against you. You outplay them. And that's let me tell you guys what's the definition of outplay. And this is not my definition. This is the actual definition. When you outplay someone, it basically means your average move is just better than theirs. So maybe they don't blunder, but the move that you make is just better than theirs. And if you make 4 good moves, that's better than their last 4 good moves. You're basically outplaying them, which means in the long run, you're just going to have a better position. So he just plays queen d3. His queen and his bishop is now on the same line. definitely going to hit him with rook to c3, hitting the queen. And now he has to ensure that he puts his queen somewhere where it guards the bishop. So I really hope from me just explaining the different types of blunders, I'm still going to make a video on this so that way I can show examples and everything. But it should be easier for you guys not to blunder. Instead of looking on the position being, okay, let's not blunder. You could just look on, okay, let's just trade the queens, we're winning. And now I'm just going to get my least active piece in the game. You could now look on the position and be like, am I making a level 1 blunder? Am I putting a piece on a square that he's guarding? Is he creating a threat that I'm about to miss? Boom. If you're not, skip to level 2. Am I making a drawback blunder? Am I making a counting blunder? That was a level 3 blunder that I just made. But anyways, that's basically how it works. So yeah, that was just a fork. I didn't see that. But the good thing is, he also made a level 2 mistake because the bishop was guarding c2 and it's no longer guarding c2. I don't need to move my rook because offense is the best defense. I'm just going to take on c2. Oh, shoot, that was bad. Holy shit. Ah, that was bad. Okay, that was bad. I thought he has to take my rook and then I'm going to take back, but he's actually able to take this rook. I could actually lose this game. Oh my God. If he had taken my rook, look at this. If he had taken my rook, I have to take back this way. He takes this way, then I take with the knight. And black is still fine, but I think black is still better because the two knights are better than the rook, but it still would have been a good position for him. He swings over the other rook. I have to play knight b6 and but he decides to take on c2, and then I'm just gonna take back. And then after bishop here, I'm going to set up a little checkmating pattern that you guys need to learn. He's attacking my pawn. I'm not going to guard it, and I'm going to play knight e5. And this is just a pattern that I know. If you're able to have a knight on, I'm not going to say f3. It's just like this square, because if you're playing with white, it's kind of like the same thing. If you're able to get a knight here, where, for example, like this, my rook is attacking, his king is in the corner. Once I play knight f3, there's nothing he could do to prevent a checkmate. Like this is GG's. Maybe he could put his bishop on e2, but that's where it stops because the king is not able to move, and my knight prevents his king from running. So this is just going to be checkmate. So he did play bishop e2. We grabbed the pawn, and I could genuinely just no, I can't remove rook to h2 because there's actually rook to a2 that he could play. But if rook a2, then I'm going to take, and then I'm going to pre-move rook takes h2. That's why the opponent resigns. More Sicilian against 1,600 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,600. Let's play some Sicilian defense. That's Pakistan. Knight f3. We go e6, d6, a6. Doesn't matter. Could even start with queen c7. But let's play e6 here. We're playing the hedgehog or the Scheveningen variation of the Sicilian. Starting it off like a Sicilian can is actually a very good way to do it because there's a lot of way for them to make mistakes. So for example here, just playing knight f6, allowing them to play e5, only allow them to play e5 if you know that you're able to play queen check. And then after knight c3, queen c7 prevents e5. The good thing about playing it like a Sicilian can is because of this variation. With the knight on c3 and us putting pressure on e4, we're able to play bishop to b4 and attack the opponent's knight. Now, bishop to b4 is actually just very good for black here. Like I'm gonna choose not to play bishop b4 because I want you guys to understand the idea of the Scheveningen. But again, if you watch the video already on the Khan and now you're watching the video on the Scheveningen or the hedgehog, playing it from a Khan allows you to play it like this. So bishop to e2, let's just continue. Let's just play d6 here, bishop e7 castle. Okay, especially with a queen on d2, bishop b4 would be perfect. So queen d2, let's just play bishop to e7. And I'm assuming he's going to castle on the queen side and then try to attack me on the king side. Usually, it's going to be a very crazy game and, somebody's going to get checkmated. Okay, he castled his king on the king side, actually. So I'm also going to castle on the king side. We always castle on the king side in the hedgehog, by the way. So now it's b6, bishop b7, knight d7. There's also b5. Again, if you play b5, you're also threatening to play b4. Pawn to f4. Maybe, okay, there's no e5 right now. So maybe I need to play b5. Let's play b5 instead of b6. If you play b6, that's also fine. But b5 comes with a threat. Again, if you watch the Khan video and now you're watching the hedgehog video, it's really cool. So bishop f3, because if I play b4, now his pawn is guarded, but now I'm able to put my bishop on b7. So I'm still attacking his e4 pawn twice. He's still guarding it twice. So he still eventually has to play pawn to a3 to prevent pawn to b4. And then I'm going to play knight d7, and my knight is still able to get to the c5 square. Yeah, I'm really not sure why he would pull his queen back to d1, honestly. Has to be a slip. Maybe he wanted to play rook to d8 or something. But that's kind of weird. Anyways, we have two pieces attacking e4. He has only two pieces guarding e4. So we're now going to be using a removing the guard tactic, pawn to b4, chasing away this knight, and then winning the pawn on e4. This is also a very cool idea that I use a lot in the modern defense as well. Okay, so he pulls his knight back to e2. Now we just take the free pawn, and just like that, we're ahead by a pawn without even finishing our development. But a lot of stuff like this is going to happen. So knight d7 to f6 is a plan. Knight d7 to c5 is a plan. Now he plays knight g3. I mean, he's just trying to trade. That's fine, though. I'm the one who's ahead by a pawn. So let's just take. If he takes my bishop first, I'll just take back. I'm not going to take his bishop because to take is a mistake. So let's just use the time to finish our development. And if he wants to take my bishop, I'll just take back. And then even after that, I still need to ensure that I get my rooks in the game. So he took on b7. Let's take back on b7. Is he going to play queen f3? Because it's crazy how... Yeah, it's crazy. Why is he trading now when he's down by the pawn? Let's just take. You should be trading when the position is equal. Okay, he took with the pawn. Now I need to get my rooks in the game. I'm going to put one rook on c8, and eventually I may put this rook on b8 and then push the queenside pawns up the board. So he plays rook to c1 to, just to add additional support to the pawn, because e5 was always an idea. Let's play rook to, I could either play rook b8 or I could double up my rooks on the c file. Let's do that. Let's double up the rooks on the c file because rook on b8 doesn't do much, but I could still double up the rooks on the c file and still push these pawns up the board. Okay, king to g2. Maybe he wants to play rook h1. Let's just double up the rooks on the c file. Now my plan is to try to get rid of the knight and then win the pawn on c2, which he saw because he overprotected the c2 pawn. And I'm just going to try to improve my position here. Like this knight would be better if it was on d5 in the center of the board. So let's just play knight f6 followed by knight d5. And then my bishop would be better if it was on this diagonal. So the plan is to go knight f6 to d5, then bishop f6 and hit the knight. So knight f6 hits the bishop, bishop on f6 hits the knight. Okay, he moves his knight out the way. Let's just hit the bishop. Bishop now has to move. If bishop b6, there's always rook to c6. And if he pulls the bishop back, I play bishop f6 and attack b2. This is just me slowly improving the position of my pieces. Actually, if the bishop goes back to d2, he loses the c pawn. So maybe he has to play bishop d4, which is a good square for the bishop. So he did play bishop c4. And before I play bishop f6, let's play rook to c4, just to apply pressure to his bishop. So that way I could at least plan to play a5, a4, because the knight becomes the only piece that guards the bishop. But it should be a very easy thing to defend against. I mean, rook to d2 is not easy, hard to find here. Okay, so he did play rook d2. Now I'm going to, okay, bishop f6 takes, he takes this pawn, but then I take with check, trade. My back rank is going to be a bit weak. There's also bishop f6 takes, pawn takes, but my h pawn is a bit weak. Okay, oh, maybe I could try trading this way. On the square for the rook. The good thing is my knight on d5 is not able to be attacked by a pawn. Then he pulls his knight back to b3. Let's just slowly improve our position to get the king in the game. I want to play e5 and hit the bishop, but he has a tactic. Like after e5, he could actually sack the bishop, and then once I take the bishop, he takes my knight. Well, I could also just take his pawn. If he does that, pawn a3 should be bad because it weakens the c3 square. So now I'm going to take on c3, and now my knight gets access to the c3 square, which means now if he takes, I take. This is still guarded. Now I'm able to play pawn to e5 and hit the bishop. I'm also able to play pawn to d5 and start rolling my pawns up the board. So that's a slight improvement of my position. Okay, pawn to g4. Not sure why. Not sure why. So pawn e5 hits the bishop, takes. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that just yet. Let's just play pawn d5 first. It also attacks his unprotected pawn. And then if he plays rook a1 to guard the pawn, there's knight to b4, which hits the pawn and the bishop. And then he's going to be forced to play a4. Maybe we grab the bishop. Try to chase away the knight and then grab the pawn here. Okay, he's helping me. Okay, actually not. He's not helping me because if I play e5, hit the bishop, he takes, and then once I take, he takes. So f5 is a very nice move. With that being said, what if I take here? Oh, he has this. Okay, f5, nice move. Nice move. Okay, I'm just gonna take on f5, give him some ugly double pawns. My pawn on d5 is isolated though. Knight to b4, or just if I take, there's rook here and win back the pawn. Bishop to d6 is also no. Bishop d6 he takes. And then if that's the threat, he's actually threatening something now. So I have to do something about that. So let's pull the knight back, hit this, hit the a3 pawn and his bishop. So if he pushes, I just take. So he pulls the bishop back, which means this is now under attack. Wait, what if I take with the bishop this time? Because if he takes with the rook, that's a 4. If he takes, I takes, and anytime he takes, I take. Then he takes, I takes, and then I'm going to be ahead by 2 pawns. Yeah, let's take on a3. Let's take on a3. If he takes, my knight takes. Now I have 3 attackers on c2. So once he takes on d5, I take on c2 with check. And then I take again, and this king is in check. Okay, now I'm ahead by 2 pawns. Not the easiest game to win, though. I cannot allow him to check and push back my king. So let's play rook. Rook c7, guarding my... Oh my god, I blundered. Rook a4, I blundered. Ay, ay, ay. Now I'm only ahead by 1 pawn because I have to move the knight. This is going to be a hard game to win because all the pieces are on the same side of the board. Okay, what to do with this knight? What to do with this knight? Let's play knight c4, hit the rook, and then once he takes, I go knight e3 and apply some pressure to his pawn. So let's attack the pawn. We're in the end game. The goal is to attack the pawns. And I have a pass pawn, by the way, so that's very nice. I'm just going to start rolling it up the board. Okay, he guards the pawn with the knight. Seems a bit inaccurate because now I'm able to do a little... Well, I'm still going to do it. I'm going to play rook to d7 to hit the knight. He's not able to protect the knight with the rook because I'm able to sack, so he plays king to e3. But this should not be too bad for me. Do I want to trade though? Knight check. He puts the king here. Okay, I'm actually going to trade. Let's trade. He takes my knight. I have to pull the rook back to d7 to not get any checks. And now I'm going to try to roll my pass pawn up the board. His pawns are weak as well. This is also going to be some nice endgame technique. I have to be very, very, very patient with it though. Very patient. Anytime I attack his pawn, he's just going to check my king. If I play h5 now, he's going to play this. So let's play h6 and then try to play king to g8, king to h7, and then eventually try to play h5. So if I was him, I would try to just leave something blockading this. Okay, let's play king g8, king h7. Okay, he's playing very well. Like he's displaying some very nice endgame technique. So king to h5 maybe. Okay, pawn f4. Now I'm able to move my rook because he's not able to check my king. So my rook is able to start roaming around now. His pawns are very weak, so eventually he should be able to get busted. My plan is to... Okay, he moves the king. That should make it a bit easier for me to roll my pawn, though. Yeah, let's just roll the pawn. Like every time I get to roll the pawn, I'm gonna take it. I have to be careful though. Like if I play king up, I could be getting checkmated. Okay, king back to e2 is bad because now I'm able to play rook to d5, hit the pawn, and there's no way for him to guard the pawn, which is why you attack weak pawns in the endgame. And his pawns were just very, very weak. So he moves the king. Now we grab the pawn, and being ahead by 2 pawns should be an easy win. But now that his pawn on f4 is pinned to the king, I'm able to play g5, and that's pp on the pp. So now he's also about to lose a third pawn. And rook to a4 is... I know he was gonna play. Guys, don't do this, man. Come on. Still losing, by the way, but you have to keep the rooks on the board because now I take on f4, and then it's just a matter of just trading. Now it's so easy to win because I have 2 pawns. Now I'm just gonna push the king and the pawn up the board at the same time, which is why he resigns. But more Hedgehog Sicilian against 1,700 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,700. Let's continue to play some Sicilian defense. I think the high elo or let's say the scientifical way to say it is the Shevin engine. Now, pawn to d4 is actually very aggressive, and I was actually planning on making an opening video on the Smith-Morra gambit because this is very, very aggressive. Now, once they play pawn to d4, we're always going to be taking on d4. Now, I actually have a way to play against the Smith-Morra gambit. So, if they okay, let's say they play c3. We're obviously going to accept the gambit because the best way to refute a sacrifice is by accepting it. Now, it's very important that you're careful here because the guy definitely has a lead in development. So let's just play pawn to d6 first. Let's see how he's gonna use his lead in development to break past our spikes. Knight to f3. Now, okay, am I worried about a piece going on b5? Maybe. So let's play pawn to a6. Now he plays bishop to c4, and then I'm going to play pawn to e6, especially since, the f7 pawn could get a bit soft. So let's now play the move pawn to e6, and our position should be fine. Now, keep in mind that we are ahead by a pawn, but it's very important that we develop our pieces quickly because the guy definitely has a lead in development. So certain things, for example, instead of playing a move like b6, I may play b5, especially since his bishop is on c4. Like, it immediately gets the tempo on the bishop, so that way I can immediately develop my bishop to b7 because the guy definitely has a lead in development. I'm not going to say I'm winning here, but he can't say he's winning either because I'm ahead by a pawn. So he castles his king. I'm going to now hit him with b5 instead of b6 because if I play b6, he gets the chance to, let's say, develop his dark squared bishop or get his rook in the game. But now that I play b5, he has to spend a move moving the same piece more than once in the opening stage of the game, and then it gets me the chance to play maybe bishop b7 or knight f6. Personally speaking, though, I'm okay. Now that he pulls the bishop back to b3, I'm actually more inclined to play knight to f. Okay, here's what I'm actually gonna do. Because I have to be careful. I have to look out for all of the possible pawn breaks that he has. Let's still put the bishop on b7. Let's still put the bishop on b7. I still have no real weaknesses. The only weakness that you could say I have is the fact that I'm behind in development. But he still has no clever ways to start putting a lot of pieces on my half of the board. But usually, how I recommend you play the Smith-Morra gambit is you don't really have to rush. Like develop the bishop, connect the rooks, get the rooks in the game, and eventually you should be able to do fine. Now, Queen E2 was played. He's just adding additional defense to the pawn because if I play pawn to b4, I'll be attacking his knight, and in some cases he may also want to play pawn to e5. So knight f6, pawn e5, I takes, he takes. Maybe I need to have my knight on d7 prepared for this. For now, let's just play bishop to e7 though, because I still want to get castled as quickly as possible. I'm just not sure if I should put my knight on f6 and allow him to play e5. Like, I want when I put my knight on f6 and he plays e5 and I takes, I'm gone out the center of the board. And again, I'm not ahead by a pawn. I'm behind. No, I'm ahead by a yeah. I'm so used to being behind by a pawn in those videos. I'm actually ahead by a pawn, but I'm behind in development. So what should we do whenever we see stuff like this? I want to ask you guys questions because, there's a lot of persons. Okay, let me answer it first. The rook is on the same line as the queen, which means we need to just move our queen off the same line as the rook. Now, let me continue now. If you read the comments, a lot of persons are going to be saying, hey, bro, once I've been watching your videos, I went from X to X, maybe 400 to 700. And, those comments, like, I really like to see those comments because it shows that what I'm doing is working. And if that's true, feel free to leave a comment about that. But there will still be some persons are saying, hey, bro, my ratings are not going through the roof. Let me tell you why your rating is not going through the roof. For one, you're not trying to use your brain while you're watching these videos. You automatically just turn off your brain. Maybe you're just watching it like this and you're just listening to what I'm saying. But you're not trying to think about my next move. You're not trying to predict my next move. You're not trying to answer the notes on the screen, like none of those stuff. Okay. I forgot that I'm playing against the Smith-Morra. Like when you play against the Smith-Morra, I don't think the queen belongs on c7 because of the fact that he's able to play rook to c8. So you may see me being forced to move my queen to b6 because once he plays rook to c1, I'm going to be forced to move my queen off the same line as the rook again. And that's going to cost me some time. So in if the C file is open, I actually recommend that you immediately put your queen on B6 instead of just putting it on C7 and putting it on C6 because that's wasting time, you know? He's also putting his bishop on the same line as my queen. Let's play knight D7 here. The Smith-Morra Gambit is a very respectable line. I'm not gonna lie. Like there's some pawn sacrifice lines out there where you just take the pawn and it's a free pawn. But the Smith-Morra Gambit, yes, you should take the pawn, but if you're not careful, now all he needs to play is rook c1. And this is actually the setup that I recommend if you're going to play the Smith-Morra Gambit. I'm definitely going to be making a video on this, on how to beat the Sicilian. Okay, so c1 was played. If I play queen b6 and he plays bishop e3, I'm going to intentionally just put my knight in the way most likely. If he push, I take. Okay, I have to be. I just want to ensure that maybe I should put my knight in the way now, but that's also weird. Let's play queen b6. It's very weird. I'm trying to develop, and what he should try to do, like if he watches my videos any at all, he needs to play moves to ensure that he keeps my king in the center of the board, even if it's not just to legally prevent my king from castling, but he needs to attack me right now. Like any attacking moves that he could find. For example, I would even play bishop to e3 if I was him. Now, if he plays bishop e3, I may play queen to a5, but then he may play bishop to d2. If he does that, then that's going to show that he's trying to play for a draw, and then I'm going to probably have to switch my strategies at that point. But hopefully, you guys are able to see the just how I'm ahead by the pawn. I'm behind in development, but I think I wasted a move. You don't want to be wasting moves whenever you're behind in development. Because if I already put my queen on b6 in the first place, he would have played rook c1, and then in this particular scenario, it would have been my turn to play. And I would have played knight f6 and get my king out the center of the board. Okay, now he plays rook to c2, which is kind of weird, in my opinion. I think he's trying to play rook to d2, so maybe not too weird. Maybe not too weird. Definitely want to play knight f6 here, and then after rook d2, I may play pawn e5, hit the bishop. And then once the bishop moves, hits my queen, I just move the queen. And I'm gonna have a weak square on d5, a weak pawn on d6, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna be ahead by a pawn. I'm actually thinking about playing rook to d8, and then if he plays rook d2, I move my knight, but we have to develop. Like, there's no other universe where our knight should stay on the back rank for too long. So now if he plays rook to d2, if I castle, I lose this pawn. Don't want to lose that pawn, especially since at the end of the variation, my queen is going to be under attack. So I'm going to play e5, and that's just the most aggressive way to guard the pawn. Now, there's certain variations of the Sicilian that you guys have been requesting a lot. For example, the Najdorf. The thing about the Najdorf is white has to play in a certain way for it to be the Najdorf. So, and at the low rated players, they're not even going to know that they're playing against the Najdorf. They're not going to know that, hey, I need to play this so that way I'm playing against the Najdorf. So he did play rook to d2. There's 3 pieces attacking d6. I only have 2 pieces guarding d6. So let's play pawn to e5, hit the bishop, forcing the bishop to move. And if you have to move away your bishop, move it to somewhere where you attack something. So definitely bishop to e3. But once he plays bishop e3, I'm thinking of just queen a5, and then his e4 pawn is going to be under attack, and then I'm going to get my king out the center of the board. I didn't calculate the opponent's checks here, by the way. So if bishop takes f7 is a move, then that would surprise me. But always ensure that you calculate the opponent's forcing moves, like what possible checks can he play, what possible captures can he play, what possible threats can he play. But if bishop f7, king f7, knight g5, I would probably just move my king back, and I should be fine. So bishop e3, I need to find somewhere for my queen here. If queen c8, then there's rook d8. Maybe just pulling the queen back to d8 is fine. I just want to ensure that I'm not blundering anything tactical. If I pull the queen back to d8 and he puts something on d5, then he may lose his pawn on e4. Queen to a5 is fine, by the way, but I don't want my queen to be too far away from the action. There's not going to be any good ways for him to attack d6. I mean, queen d8, there's knight h4. I should be able to play g6 and just prevent his knight from going there. So let's play queen d8. Now, once I castle, the goal from here is just to consolidate. And if he allows me to consolidate, like he doesn't get back his pawn or at least a real attack, then black is just going to be better, fortunately. Okay, knight to g5 is very interesting. f7 is under attack. If I castle, bishop f7, rook f7, knight e6, my queen is not trapped. If I castle, knight f7, rook f7, He doesn't necessarily need to take the rook just yet, but I'm not really seeing other ways for him to apply pressure to my pinned rook. So let's just get the king out the center of the board, and we're going to play h6 and then just spike him out of our half of the board. And by the way, because I'm the one who's ahead by a pawn, I'm fine with all the trades. So my weak pawn again, my weaknesses now is d6 and d5. These are my weaknesses, but I'm ahead by a pawn. So I think that's enough compensation. If he put something on the d5 square, it's good for me because I'm trading, which is what he did. But personally, knight d5 immediately is actually a blunder because what he didn't see is the fact that my bishop and my queen is actually x-raying his knight on g5. And what did I tell you guys about the hedgehog? If anything comes into my half of the board, he's gonna get spiked. So the tactic here is to simply take the knight. If I take the knight, I'm just gonna take on g5 next move. Now, if I take the knight and he plays bishop takes, I have to take here first. And then once he plays rook takes, then I take on g5. Oh, but then he has rook d6. Okay, I don't think it was a blunder. Let's think. If I take the knight, he plays bishop takes d5. If I take this knight, he takes this bishop. If I take the knight, he plays bishop takes d5. I play bishop takes d5. He plays rook takes d5. His knight is hanging. If I take his knight, my pawn on d6 is no longer guarded. So he takes on d6. Taking on d6 means my knight is now pinned, and there's no way for me to add additional defense to my knight. Okay, with that being said, maybe I'm not winning a piece, but definitely still want to trade the pieces off the board. So we're still going to be doing it. So let's just take. And then after bishop takes, I'm still going to take. But then after rook takes, I may not take. I may just do something else first. Maybe h6 to chase away his knight. I don't think I want to move my bishop from e7. I think it's doing a good defensive role because, it's like it's a piece that is worth 3 points guarding the pawn. And there's like 10 points of material attacking d6. Come on, bro. Why would you play queen to h5? You're trying to be fancy. Just take back the piece. I think he thought he was actually losing a piece because I thought he was losing a piece. Now, what he definitely missed is okay, he's threatening a checkmate on h7. But I'm actually there's so much I could do here. Like I could actually pull the same knight back, prevent the mate, bishop takes check king over, but what if I use the knight on f6 to prevent the mate? There, he can't even take on f7 or h7. So now he has to move the queen because I gained the tempo on the queen. And then once he moves the queen, I take on e3. So that was you should have just take on d5, bro. So I thought I won a piece. He probably thought he lost a piece, which is crazy. But now he has to move the queen. Once he moves the queen, okay, now my knight is under attack. I'm ahead by a piece, so I definitely want to trade. So let's just take on e3. And this is now just completely winning for black. I mean, yes, there's two pieces targeting f7. I don't care. I have two pieces guarding it. His queen and his knight is targeting h7. I don't care. I also have two pieces guarding it. And eventually, I'm still going to play h6 and spike him out of my half of the board. Anyways, now that he takes, huh, it's funny because I was just about to say I'm thinking about knight takes e4 because the knight is pinned. But that would be the funniest checkmate. So I'm not actually going to play h6. Maybe queen to b6 first, so that way I attack this unprotected pawn. And then when he guards it, that's when I play h6. And then I'm also going to be winning his pawn on e4. So queen to b6 is just a principled move, trying to... Okay, actually, if I play queen b6, he's probably going to play rook f8. I take with check, he moves the king. Because I think he wants to sack his rook here. But it shouldn't work. Let's just play queen to b6. If rook to f2, then I take, and the rook is going to be pinned. If rook to f1, I take with check. If he moves, then I play h6. Maybe I could even take here, and then if he sack the rook, I just play h6. There's a lot of stuff I could do here. So what he decided to do was to pull the queen back to h3 in order to guard the pawn. Let's just kick that knight out of our half of the board using the principle of neutralization. And okay, I'm wondering if knight f7, rook f7, queen e6 is good. Yeah, I think it's good. Knight f7, rook f7, queen e6 applies pressure to the pin piece, and he's also attacking my bishop. But that's fine though. Like I'm ahead by a piece. He has 30 seconds on the clock. I think he's gonna be able to take my bishop here. But first, let's take on e6 with check. Let's check the king, forcing the king to move. And then once the king moves, it's just a matter of I'm ahead by 7 points of material, so eventually I'm gonna have to sacrifice something. Because he's threatening my bishop and he's threatening my knight. So if I take on e4, he takes my rook. Well, my rook, maybe rook to f8. Yeah, let's try rook to f8. He needs to take my bishop here. So he took the bishop, now I'm ahead by 4 points of material. And what I'm thinking of here is to play knight takes e4, hits the rook. And then once I hit the rook, wait, can I just sack my queen? Nah, if I sack my queen, he sack his queen. Wait, no, because my queen guards the rook. Wait, if I sack my queen, he take. Oh, let's sack the queen actually. Oh, but he's actually able to sack on f8, but he missed it, and then I took his queen. Now I'm completely winning again. I also have 15 seconds on the clock, so I have to play very fast. I'm hitting the rook, I'm threatening a fork, so this is completely winning for black. He's trying to trade. Let's give a check, force the king. Oh no, I should have actually take the rook and then checkmate him. That was bad. Let's take here though. Like we're in some time pressure here, so we have to play fast. Let's just pull the knight back, threaten a checkmate. And if he takes my bishop, he's mated. He saw it. Let's just take here. He has 1 minute, 1 second on the clock. He lost. With that being said, more Hedgehog Sicilian against 1800 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1800. Let's continue to play some Hedgehog Sicilian. I think it's also called the Chevin engine variation of the Sicilian. Okay, pawn to c3 is also another anti-Sicilian now. This is called the Alapin variation of the Sicilian, and I was also planning on making a video on this. But let's see how well he knows it. Let's play pawn to e6. I could have also played pawn to d6, both ways are fine here. But pawn to d4 takes, and then pawn to d6 should be fine. So he plays knight f3. Now I'm going to play pawn to a6. I'm trying to play the hedgehog Sicilian against anything that they play. But there's actually a specific way that I like to play against, let's say, the Smith Mora or the Alapin variation. Maybe I'm going to do a separate video on how to attack those directly. But for now, let's focus on the hedgehog. So bishop to e2. Let's play pawn to d6, same idea. And then we're going to play knight f6. Now, anytime they play d4, we're going to take. We're always going to take if we play the Sicilian. The purpose of d6 is to ensure that once we put the knight on f6, it's not very easy for him to play pawn to e5. So he castles the king. Let's play knight to f6, attacking the pawn on e4. And there's usually some tricks here, by the way. For example, let's say he plays h3, right? H3 is just a wasting time. It doesn't work, but it's just a trick because his pawn is hanging. And if I take the pawn, then queen to a4 actually checks my king and hit the knight. But he decides to play pawn to e5. So let's just take on e5 here. This has to be fine for black. And now that he takes, there's a piece on my half of the board. So I'm going to start with queen to c7. And I'm immediately trying to neutralize that knight. And then he plays pawn to d4. And in this case, I don't think I want to take just yet. Because the queen is on c7, and after takes, what we learned in that 1700 game is once a rook is on the c file, we're going to have to move the queen anyway. So let's play bishop to d6 first. And by the way, I'm not going to do bishop e7 castle and then the same little ideas because the position is a lot more open. And because the position is a lot more open, I have to play a bit more active because he decided to play pawn to e5 a bit too quickly. So now that he played f4 to try to cement his knight on the e4 square, I get my king out the center of the board. And then I'm going to think about taking on d4. I mean, taking on d4 also gives him an isolated pawn. He's also weakening his e4 square, but I'm just trying not to rush all of this. Like, I'm trying to ensure that I finish my development first. Okay, king to h1 was played. It's a very safe move. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a bit too early to play king to h1. The funny thing is, my bishop is going to be on b7 pointing towards his king anyways. So that's going to be something. All right, so takes is an idea because now he's going to have an isolated pawn. So I think that's a good idea. Let's take on d4. And eventually I'm going to have to move my queen once his rook gets to the c file. But in my defense, he's going to have an isolated pawn. That's what I'm working with. He could also take with the queen. But that looks like it's developing the queen too early. He did take with the queen. So now I'm thinking of moves like rook to d8, just putting my rook on the same line as the queen. Yeah, let's do that. Let's play a rook to d8. Let's put the rook on the same line as the queen, so that way we could be threatening some discovered attacking stuff. I want to play pawn to b5, but I know the moment I play pawn b5, he's going to play bishop f3 and hit my rook. But it shouldn't matter too much if I'm able to meet bishop f3 with bishop to b7. Okay, now he plays queen to c4, which is it's not the best move, bro, to be honest. I'm about to do something, it's risky though, that's the thing. But moving the queen to c4 left the knight on e5 soft. That's like a drawback mistake. Now I have two pieces attacking the knight. What if I take, if he takes my queen, I take his queen and I'm winning. So if I take on e5 and then take on e5 again, the reason why I say it's risky because there's this bishop to f4 move. But at that point, I'm going to be ahead by a pawn, which means my goal from there is to start trading. It's very risky though, because I'm giving him the bishop here. But a pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. Let's just take the pawn. If he takes, I take. And I'm not really seeing what he has after that. The only attacking move on my queen is bishop to f4. And then I should be, okay, let's just take here. And then I should be able to play queen to d5 or queen to e4. Just trying to trade the queens off the board. And I hope you guys notice how I play, especially when I'm playing these higher rated guys. You're ahead in material, just get the queens off the board. No drama. So bishop f4, let's say queen d5. Queen d5, there's actually rook to d1, which would be a very nice tactic. And then takes, okay, rook d1 doesn't work. If rook d1, I just take, yeah. So queen d5 hits the queen. Where does he put the queen? Okay, he's gonna pull the queen back to b3, and then he's gonna play rook to d1. So I think I don't want to put my queen on e4. But then if I put my queen on, if I put my queen on any one of these square, okay, I'm actually gonna put the queen here. So that way, after he's not really able to decline the queen trade because his bishop is gonna be hanging. So here takes. Let's just check if anything is hanging. It's not. Let's go queen e4, and we're just getting the queens off the board. So he's down by a pawn. Maybe you could say he has the bishop here for compensation. We're going into the end game as well, so let's see how this goes. My goal from here is to just finish my development as quickly as I possibly can. What I noticed from playing the Hedgehog Sicilian is persons in chess don't know how to create a plan, and the Hedgehog Sicilian comes with its own plan. Like you know the setup, you know where to put the pieces, and sometimes the opponent finished their development before you, but because you have no weakness, it's hard for them to attack you. So it's kind of frustrating trying to attack, but then there's no attack. Okay, he develops his knight to the edge of the board, but that's actually a good score for the knight because eventually he could move it to c4. But now I'm thinking of just playing pawn to b5, and if he plays bishop to f3, I play bishop to b7. But if I play pawn b5, there's no rook to d8 just yet, so let's play pawn to b5. Because if he plays rook to d1, then I'll take, and if he takes, I'm able to fork. So rook to d1 would be an inaccurate move. He plays bishop to f3 instead, hitting the knight. The knight is also pinned. I'm not able to move, but the plan was to play bishop b7 to guard the knight. And if he tries to apply more pressure to my knight with, let's say, rook e1, I'm able to play knight c5, which is just trading more pieces off the board. And one additional tip that I could give you guys is if you're playing against a bishop pair, like you have the knight and bishop, they have the two bishops, it's best to just try to get at least one of the bishops off the board. If you get at least one of the bishops off the board, then that's good enough. So knight back to c2 was played. Maybe knight d4 or knight d3 is a possibility. I'm going to choose to play knight d7 here just to finish my development. If he puts the knight on d4, then pawn to e5 should be a very nice fork, which just wins the game. And if he plays rook to e1, applying more pressure to my knight, then knight to f6 applies more defense to the knight, and I should be fine. Or I could just, okay, rook to, I think he used the wrong rook. I think he, come on, bro, like we know about this. You're 1800. What country is this? I think it's Kenya. Nice. Okay, so you should have used this rook for sure. Now that you use this rook, I'm able to check your king. And it's not just a check. Like after I check the king and the king move, I'm going to take the bishop. And you have to be careful. I think you have to take my knight here because if you take back my bishop, knight d3 is a fork and you're toast. So let's check the king. Once the king moves, we grab the bishop, and if he takes my bishop, I move the bishop, and no, I got one of the bishops, which is fine. Immediate knight d3, he's going to take my bishop, so we can't really afford that. But you should be thinking about getting all your pieces in the game. I don't know how he saw his rook on f1 was doing something, and his rook on a1 wasn't doing anything, and he still decided to well, okay, maybe he didn't see it, because if he saw it, he wouldn't have done it. So let's not say he still decided to do it. But it's just something that you have to learn. I think there's a term for it whenever you use the wrong rook instead of the other one. I think it's some contradicting rooks or something like that. I don't remember, but there's a term for it. Don't do it. And this is also something else, which is like there's literally only one move that he should play. He's taking so much time to play the move. I think he's trying to think ahead of what's going to happen. But if there's literally only one move you should play, bro, just play the move so that way you don't lose on time. And then once I play my move, now you could start thinking since you have options. And if you're going to be thinking for so long on an only move, after I play my move, you should play your moves quick. So he took, my bishop is now under attack. Now I'm just going to move my bishop back to d5, centralizing the bishop. Pulling the bishop all the way back to b7 was also fine. But I'm doing this because I'm aware that it's actually opposite colored bishop. So if he tries to attack my bishop, I'm just going to give it to him. So it's easier to try to win the game if it's a knight versus a bishop than trying to win the game if we traded the knights off the board and it's opposite colored bishops. Like, hopefully you guys know about these ideas. Okay, pawn h3 was played. I don't know what that does, to be honest. I don't know why you would play pawn a3. I'm thinking knight f6, so that way my knight could get access to the e4 square. Yeah, let's do knight f6. The plan was to play knight f6 to defend my bishop anyways. Eventually, I'm going to play rook c8, but I'm still ahead by a clean pawn here, so I'm just trying to slowly grind out this position, like get all the pieces in the game as quickly as I possibly can first, and then I could try to start trade some pieces. Okay, so knight to b4 was played to hit the bishop. Okay, I want to check. It doesn't do anything. We already said that we wanted to give him the bishop, so let's just play a5 and hit the knight. Let's kind of force him to take our bishop. And yes, this is it's actually a good bishop. I'm not gonna lie, but it's just gonna be easier for me to win if it's a knight versus a bishop. Now, if he takes, there's knight takes hit the bishop. But I prefer to play rook take so that way my rook controls the file. Because now my rook is on a file. You could say his rook is on a file. It's a semi-open file. It's pointing towards a pawn chain, so it's not as active as my rook. Now I could think about doubling up my rooks on the file. And one thing I see a lot of my students fall for is they they're not aware of certain things in the endgame. For example, what am I playing against here? I'm playing against a dark squared bishop. If I'm going to be playing against a dark squared bishop, I have to avoid the dark squares. It's important that I put my pieces on light squares. So, for example, a move like rook to d8 seems so natural, but bishop to c7 is actually a very annoying move. So he decides to play pawn g4. It's a good move, by the way, because for one, he wants to chase away my knight, and two, he's also preventing rook to f5. Now, what if I still play h5, and if he plays g5, I play rook f5. If he takes, I check, then I take. And if h5 takes, I play rook f5, pin the bishop. And if he tries to defend the bishop, it's easy PP on the PP. So let's play h5 here. h5 is also attacking his pawn. So assuming he needs to move the king to guard the pawn, but it's gonna be a very weak pawn that he has. And rook to e5 is just losing a pawn. Like, maybe he thinks I'm just gonna take his rook, then I take. Like, if I first take the rook, then he takes, and then I try to win the pawn this way, he's gonna first take my knight. But what if I just take the pawn? Like, you guys should also know that it's very important to not release tension. Now, I take the pawn. If he takes back, then I fork his rook. If he takes my rook first, I take, and then I'm hitting the bishop. So first he has to defend the bishop, and then I'm going to either take the pawn or take the bishop, then take the pawn. So taking here is just free pawn. I mean, it's counting, bro. I have two pieces on the pawn. He only has one piece on the pawn. Let's just take the free pawn. So now we're ahead by 2 pawns. And what I'm seeing a lot from this video is I'm trying my best to play good moves, very solid, get the pieces out. And what persons are doing against me is blunder. So if you're someone who watches a lot of my videos, there's actually a little trend. Like, whenever I play with the white pieces, I sack my pawns, I attack them, I keep their king in the center, and I win. Whenever I play with the black pieces, I let them do the blundering, and then I win from that. Okay, so he pulls the bishop back. Let's just take a third pawn. That's a dead pawn though, like rook to h1 picks up the pawn very, very easily. So from here, once he plays rook h1, was expecting that. Maybe I need to play knight f6, try to get the bishop off the board. But let's just play rook to c8. Let's just get my rook in the game. And then after he takes, I play pawn to b4. Now, the winning side in the endgame should not be trading pawns. You should try to win the pawns. But my whole idea of playing this move was to get my rook active. And then he plays bishop to e5, decent move. He's trying to guard his pawn. But now I'm going to hit him with a removing the guard tactic. Hit him with pawn to f6, forcing the bishop away. And then I take the free pawn. And if he tries to keep the bishop guarding the pawn, I'm going to hit him with e5, attacking the bishop another time. And his bishop could also be trapped. So he has to be very careful. Okay, so he plays bishop to d6. Now I have 3 attackers versus his 2 defenders, which means that's definitely a third pawn. And then once he takes, we're definitely going to take with the rook, because once we're ahead in material, the goal is just to start trading as many pieces off the board. If he declines the trade, then his unprotected pawn and his king will give me another pawn. Okay, now I'm hitting the pawn. Okay, oh, he blundered. He plays a3 to try to guard the pawn. But one thing I want to teach you guys, whenever you're playing against a knight, if both of your pieces are on opposite colors, then the knight is just never gonna fork. Because the knight attacks on the same color. But knight e4 just completely wins the game. And that's why the opponent resigns. More Cheveningen against 1900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1900. Let's play some Sicilian. I think this is the Ethiopian. Nice. And then he's playing the Alapin variation of the Sicilian, quite respectable. Let's see how well he knows it though. I'm gonna play e6 and then d6. So once they play d4, we're always gonna take, and then we play d6. Now it seems weird because I'm blocking out both of my bishops, but we already know the plan. So knight c3, we play a6. We're playing the Cheveningen or the hedgehog variation of the Sicilian. The good thing is, if he plays e5, I have d5, and if he plays d5, I have e5. So knight to f3, let's just play bishop to e7. I don't want to rush my knight to f6 and then he immediately starts attacking. So I like to play moves like knight d7 or even queen c7. But one thing I notice is I don't really like my queen on c7 if the c file is open, because if the queen goes to c7, a rook can go to the c file. Okay, now that he plays bishop d3, I should be able to play knight f6, because if e5 takes, I'm able to put my knight on the d5 square. So he did play e5, let's take. The guy's playing very aggressive, and then he attacks my knight again, but my knight is able to get to the d5 square. And the good thing is, his pawn on e5 is an overexerted pawn. It's not a weak pawn though, because it can be guarded by a pawn, but that pawn could be a target in the long run. Okay, he's doing a lot of trades. Definitely not gonna take with the pawn because it just gives me an isolated pawn. So let's just take with the queen here, applying some pressure to his bishop, and then he decides to castle. Now we continue with our plan. I'm gonna start with knight to. Okay, why not knight c6, bishop d7? Kind of want to get my bishop on this diagonal, but I'm not sure if it's possible anymore. Maybe it is. If pawn b5, there's rook e1, and if bishop b7, there's bishop e4. Oh, but then I take the queen. Okay, let's try that. Let's play pawn b5. If rook e1 trying to play bishop e4, I play bishop e7. And if bishop e4, I take the queen, then take the bishop, and I'm ahead by a piece. So I'm still able to put the bishop on this diagonal. Thing is though, my queen is in the center of the board. Okay, queen to c2, very nice move, because now he's threatening both bishop to e4, he's threatening to take my bishop, and he's threatening my h7 pawn. But I don't care about the h7 pawn. Let's just play bishop b7. Because if he takes on h7, it opens the file pointing towards his king, so I could attack him. And in some cases, I could play g6 to trap his bishop. Could be risky though, because if g6, he's able to sack. So now he plays rook to e1. What if I play knight c6, and if bishop e4? Nah, yeah. Wait, knight c6, bishop e4, knight b4. If he takes my queen, I take his queen. That's a fork. And then if he takes my bishop, I attack his bishop. And then once the bishop move, I take his rook. But then I'm going to lose my knight. That's not worth it. Let's just move the queen out of the way. Like, he's threatening bishop e4. Let's just move the queen to c5. Seems to be the safest square for the queen, to be honest. I think now, though, now bishop takes h7 could be a possibility. But what I may do is take on c2, then take on f3 and double up his pawns. If he takes g6, I trap his bishop, and then he sack the bishop, he take on g6. I'm ahead by a piece, but he's gonna attack my king. That's too much drama. And if I move my king away, his rook joins the game. That's too much drama. So if bishop h7, I'm just gonna take. So he didn't go for that. So let's just take on c5. And we're now in an endgame. And I think black has a slightly more comfortable endgame because of this overexerted pawn. So my plan from here is to play knight d7. Maybe I'm not going to castle, to be honest. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Let's see. Because we're in the endgame and king activity becomes crucial in the endgame. Okay, he plays knight g5. I'm assuming he just doesn't want to double up his pawns. He's also trying to win the pawn on h7, and he wants to play knight e4 to centralize his knight. So let's say I play knight d7. Yeah, I'm just going to play knight d7, because if bishop takes, now I trap the bishop. And if knight takes, I sack the rook, then I trap the bishop. It's risky though. It's very risky. Knight d7, knight takes, sack the rook, takes, trap the bishop, h4. And if king f8, there's bishop check. So I think he wants to put his knight on e4 to hit my bishop and eventually get his knight on d6. But here's what I'm going to do. I know the knight is going to e4 anyways to attack my bishop. So let's just move the bishop away now and gain a tempo on his rook. Because if I play h6 first and he attacks the bishop, then I play bishop b4, he's at least able to play bishop d2. So now he has to move the rook, then I play h6. And then after knight e4, I develop. And then he's also going to gain back the tempo on my bishop. And I'm still going to have to pull my bishop back to d7. But it also, his pawn on e5 is only being guarded by the rook. So maybe if he puts his rook somewhere else, which is what he did, I don't even have to play h6 anymore. I could now play knight d7 and attack this pawn. So now if he takes this pawn, I can always take this pawn, which is why he plays a3. And okay, if I take the pawn, I lose the bishop, so I have to move the bishop. If bishop a5, he may have to guard the pawn. If bishop f4, bishop c7 hits the pawn again, but then there's rook e1. And then knight e4 to d6 is going to be threatening. So let's just play bishop e7, hit the knight. So now, well, his knight is guarded, but I'm attacking his pawn. So if he plays something like bishop f4, I take the knight, then take the pawn. If he plays pawn f4, I take the knight, and then once the pawn takes, I take the pawn. So maybe he has to put his rook back on e8, which is kind of annoying for him, not for me. I'm fine. And then once I play h6 to hit the knight, if he plays knight e4, he's still going to lose the pawn. So that's why you have to be careful when you have these overexerted pawns. Like pushing up the pawns is good when you're attacking, but if the attack doesn't work and then you have to play like an endgame or something like that, then it really becomes harder for you. Okay, so he did decide to take on h7. So maybe what he's calculating is if I sack my rook and then play g6, he's able to play h4. But I'm just going to take on e5, to be honest. No, I'm just going to take it, the bishop. The bishop has to move. I'm trying to see if I'm able to use the fact that I have this open line pointing towards his king to start some attack. It's hard though, but I'm sure there's an idea to sack the rook and then trap the bishop. Okay, there's no h4, so that's good. He pulls the bishop back. What if I sack, play h6, the bishop is trapped? Yeah, that's actually very risky. I don't want to calculate all of that. What I could do though is play f6. Yeah, because if I play f6, the knight has nowhere to go. Or I could play rook c8. Rook c8, if he pulls the knight back, I sack the rook, then I take it the rook. I mean, there's rook c7 at that point. Should be able to play bishop d5 and I'm safe. Pawn f6 seems... Okay, pawn f6, there's probably f4. And then once I move the knight, there's bishop check. So let's play rook to c8, which is a very nice idea. Rook c8 is a very nice idea because, I mean, pulling the knight back to g5 it's just... Who wouldn't want to get their knight out of there? I'm not trying to trick the guy, by the way. Like, I'm just getting my pieces in the game. If he wants to pull his knight back out, that's on him. If he doesn't pull the knight out, it could eventually get trapped. But it's still tricky though, because knight back I sack, rook takes I take, rook is on my 7th rank, which is already annoying. Hits my bishop, bishop d5, there's rook a7, hits my pawn. I mean, it's annoying. I'm not sure. Okay, maybe at that point I'm able to play bishop f4, threaten h2, but then he has h3. So he decides to play 4 in one move, slightly weakening his king. Bishop to c5 check is now definitely an idea. If I play knight here, h3, bishop c5, king f1, or do I play bishop c5, then knight here, so that way it becomes a threat? Bishop c, yeah, let's go bishop c5. No, I'm not sure if I want to make it that easy for his knight to come out though. Bishop c5, king h1, or king f1. There's also king f1. But let's do it. Let's go bishop c5 check. Remember we spoke about this? Anytime you're going to be pushing the f-pawn, always be on the lookout if there's any possible checks on this diagonal. If king h1, knight g4 is very strong. If king f1, knight g4 is alright. It's also attacking h2 though. So he did play king to f1. Now knight g4 hits the pawn. If he pushes the pawn, I check. Let's go knight g4. If he pushes the pawn, I check. And then if he moves the king, I take. And hopefully my knight is not trapped. Like, we're both trying to put our knights in some crazy scenarios. There's also knight e3, which just gets the bishop here, and black should be definitely fine. Like, having the bishop here with the opponent's king looking like this is nice, but the pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. So knight check. If king here I take, and I'm threatening this. Knight check if king e1 I take. And if he plays rook here, then I have this check. So let's play knight h2 check. That's definitely winning a pawn. If the king goes to e1, I take, and I shouldn't worry about losing my pieces. Even though they're both unprotected and weird, I should be able to either take on h3, play knight f3, and I'm fine. So king to e1, take the free pawn, rook to d. Okay, let's just take the free pawn. Finally, he gets to get his knight out, but at what cost? Because that's also another pawn. Or if I want to trade, I'm actually gonna probably play knight f3, and after takes, I hit the rook, and then I take on h3. Look at his king on e1. His king castled and then walked all the way back to e1. My king hasn't castled in this game, so he decides to pull the knight back. I could take a pawn here, but I prefer to play it like this, knight f3 check, because after the knight takes, I hit the rook, which means h3 is still gonna hang. And it's crazy because my bishop here is so strong. His rook on e1 is not doing anything. He hasn't developed his bishop. He could be getting checkmated. So rook to d3. Okay, there's bishop e4, but that doesn't win the bishop. There's also bishops b4, but that doesn't do much. So let's just take. Let's just take. He doesn't really have good ways to attack my bishop. He also has a minute on the clock, so this is GG's. Okay, bishop a2. Just a way to get his rook to guard his bishop. Now if I check, there's no king here or king here, so the king has to go here. And then I check, and the king has to go to either c2 or c3. If the king goes to c2, I pin the rook. If the king goes to c3, there's discovered attacks. So rook to a1 is just winning. So king d2, we play rook to d1. The king has to step on the same line as my rook. Okay, if king c2, there's no... I mean, I could play bishop to e4, but then he takes my rook, I take his rook. That's just a trade. So what I'm going to do instead is, wait, what if I play bishop to e4 check? Blocks with the rook, I takes, and I'm ahead by 2 pawn, and then that's just winning. It's just a good way to trade all the pieces off the board. There's also bishop takes a3. He blocks with the rook, takes, king takes, and I'm still winning up 3 pawns. But I think it's best if I play rook e3, bishop e3 check, because getting all the pieces off the board is best. So let's take on c3 with check. Pawn has to take. Then we take on c1 with check, rook has to take, then we take again. And this is just converting a winning position. We have 2 pawns extra. Step 1 is to ensure that we get working in the game. So first, let's activate the king. Now I'm just going to move the bishop. Keep in mind, he's not allowed to trade, so he has to pull back. And now I have 3 pawns versus 1 pawn. First, I'll play e5. If he takes, I take, and now I have connected pass pawns. And we know what to do in the endgame. Roll the pass pawns up the board. So now I'm just rolling the pawn. He only has 16 seconds on the clock, so should be an easy win. Let's continue to roll the pawns up the board. Okay, now if I roll, he takes. So let's pull the bishop back first. So once I roll, this is going to be guarded. So he moves. Let's check. King has to move. We continue to roll. King still has to move. And then we continue to roll the pawns. Okay, now he hits the pawn. Let's continue to roll the pawn with check. And because I'm going to queen on a light square, this should just be winning. It doesn't matter where I check, but once I check and the king moves, I'm able to queen the pawn. And then once the king takes, well, he resigns. More Sicilian defense against 2,000 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 2,000. We're about to finish off with a bang of a Sicilian, some Ninja type of Sicilian, some hedgehog type of Sicilian. Knight takes, I'm going to play, let's go knight f6 first and hit the pawn. And after knight c3, play a6. Now, this is actually the Najdorf setup, especially if I play e5. The Najdorf Sicilian will be the next Sicilian video that I drop. But after bishop c5, let's just play e6, bishop e7, and play a regular Ninja setup. Bishop to e3, let's go bishop to e7, get the king out the center of the board. And remember, if you want to play against me, just drop your username in the chat and the elo. Pawn h5 is a very weird move. Maybe he wants to push the pawn all the way up the board. Let's play h6 now and chase away that bishop from now. So that way it doesn't cause any havoc. And then once the bishop moves, I think he's going to play queen d2 and try to sacrifice here. But that's fine. Let's continue with the regular setup. Queen goes to c7, knight d7, b5, bishop b7, rook c8. I'm going to do all of that before I get castled. Okay, queen f3. Maybe he wants to play queen g3. And then if I castle, he takes on h6. So that's a nice idea. I mean, okay, that's actually a very nice idea. Well, let's just continue to develop. Let's go knight d7. Queen g3, I will not be able to castle here due to bishop h6. And if knight h5, there's queen g4. So what can I play? If knight g5, there's queen to... Okay, knight g5, queen g4. Knight f6. Force the queen to move and then play e5. So that way my knight gets to the f4 square. This is weird. I don't want to pull my bishop back to f8. Actually, maybe I could just play g6. Let's just play g6. And eventually I could go bishop f8 to g7. So I should be fine here. There's still no piece on my half of the board. The plan is still to go for b5, bishop e7, rook c8. Just need to be careful though, like f4, f5 could be aggressive. Yep, and he went for it. He went exactly for it. Okay, let's play b5. The good thing is, if f5, I'm going to play g takes, and then my rook could enjoy the g file. Bad thing is, my king is not going to be getting castled. So he did went for f5. e6 and g6 is under attack, so let's just take. Now, once he takes, this is also under attack twice. I'm thinking about rook g8, but h6 is going to be hanging in a lot of variations. So I'm thinking about e5 now. Like, just play e5, hit the knight, force the knight to move. I should be able to play d5, and then the control that I have in the center of the board should be good enough. I'm not going to play rook to g8 just yet, but once I play rook g8, I want to be able to play knight g4, protect h6, and attack his bishop. I think he went for the attack a bit too fast. Okay, so he puts his knight on b3. Interesting. I want to play d5. I'm not seeing how he's going to prevent d5. So let's just finish our development first. Maybe I can even castle on the queen side, to be honest, because it's already a crazy position. Pawn to d5 is my plan. But the thing is, if I play d5 and try to fork, he's able to take because my queen is unprotected. So, okay, he castles. And that should be a mistake. Because now I'm able to play rook to g8, hit the queen, and then I'm going to be able to take on g2. Unless when I take on g2, he takes on h6. So that's why he pulls the queen all the way back to e1. So that way, if I takes, he takes. I don't want to give him this pawn, because if he gets this pawn, he has a pass pawn. So let's play h5 first. Oh, but then he's able to play bishop g5. That's a nice move. Well, if bishop g5, then I'm just going to take the free pawn. So he plays rook to g8 instead. Still a pawn, though. Still a pawn. Rook takes, bishop takes, maybe queen to g3. Pull the bishop back, queen to g7. All right, that's kind of risky. Let's just play. Let's just play knight g4, hit the bishop. I mean, his e pawn could be under attack in a lot of cases as well. I need to ensure that nothing is able to get to d5, and I also need to just get my king out the center of the board. Maybe my king is safe in the center of the board. Actually, I just need to connect my rooks. So he pulls the bishop back. Now I want to play d5. Yeah, definitely want to play d5 now. I just need to be careful to not fall for anything with my king in the center. But once you're aware that your king is in the center, then you know the types of moves to play. Bishop back to e2. He's trying to neutralize my knight. Fine with that. If he takes, I'm just gonna take. Okay, now is a good time to get the king out the center of the board. Let's just get the king out the center. Bishop to c5 I'd like to play, but his knight on b3 guards that. Okay, why would he pull the knight back to b1? I guess he's afraid of d4. Oh no, he wants to play bishop to a5. That's what he wants to do. Right. With that being said, I don't want to move my rook though. Maybe I should just move the queen somewhere. Hmm. All right, let's just play knight to c5. It prevents bishop a. Oh my god, it doesn't prevent bishop a5. I thought if bishop a5 I take and it's unprotected, but the queen guards it. Okay, what if I take on a5? Hit the queen, he takes my queen, I take his queen. Oh, but then he takes my rook. I think I'm about to be down in material. Oh, I missed that. Oh my lord, I'm gonna lose. Okay, let's calculate. I think I have to take the knight first. I think I have to take the knight with check. Now, once he takes, I take on h4. Obviously, if queen takes, I take the bishop. So once I take on h4, he's gonna take my queen. Then I'm gonna take his queen. Then he's gonna take my rook. And I'm just down a rook. And if I take his bishop, he takes my bishop. That doesn't work. All right, let's just play queen to d7. That's fine. If he takes, I take back, and then I missed something. I definitely missed something. Now he's just trading everything off the board, and he's also going to be taking on e5. Ay ay ay. But let's take on h4 here. Let's take on h4. He's ahead by an entire exchange. I'm gonna try to at least draw this. Maybe rook to e1. He also has way more time on the clock than me. Rook to e3. He's threatening to play rook c3. So to prevent rook c3, I'm gonna play d4, preventing the rook from going here. I want to be able to check here. I also want to be able to hit the queen. What have I gotten myself into? Rook to d1. Okay, for now I should be able to check. He has to block with the knight, which means I'm not losing this. If I take here, he moves the king, and then I go here to protect the pawn, but then he has c3. Ah, I think I have to do it though. That's the thing. I have to take the risk because I'm the one who is losing. Okay, let's take here. King to b1 gets out of the pin. What do I play after king to b1? King to, okay, he still has two pieces attacking here, so I still have one more move to do something. I was thinking bishop to e3, but there's pawn c3. Rook e1, he checks here. What if I play queen c7? Takes, I take. Yeah, and just trade the queens off the board. Let's try that. And by the way, it's not good to trade queens when you're down in material, but if I don't trade queens, I'm going to get checkmated. And I'm trying to get my queen off the same line as the rook. So if he takes, at least I could say I have the bishop here. They're also unprotected, to be honest. I have this pass pawn that I'm going to try to roll. But let's see. I actually want him to trade the queens. That's crazy. He didn't trade the queen. Whoa. He decides to attack my bishop, and if I move the bishop, I lose the pawn. Oh my lord. That was such a strong move. Okay, I'm able to play f6. Pawn f6 guards the bishop and still threatens to trade the queen. Nice. I had to find that. I had to find that. So I'm only down by 1 point. Luckily, I also have a pass pawn. So rook to g1, maybe bishop h3. Or just take the knight, then play bishop f3, and then try to win this pawn. If that happens, I'm going to win the game. But I have to play fast because this guy's playing very fast. He pulls the knight back to g1, which means this is hanging. What if I just take the knight? I don't want to lose the bishop here, though. What if I play bishop f3, hits the rook? If he takes, I takes, hits the rook, rook e1, and then after rook e1, okay, I have no time. I have to play here, here, hit the rook again. That will not work. Takes, go here. That will not work. All right, I just have to do it. I just have to play fast. Rook here, I'm just going to play this. Okay, let's do this, hit the pawn. I just have to play fast. If I play slow, I'm going to lose on time anyways. If he checks, I move. Pawn c3, I just take. I want to take this pawn. But if I take this, he's going to take this. I'm going to have two pass pawn though. I'm trying to find a plan. Okay, so he hits my bishop. Takes. Ooh, okay. Let's just. Oh my god, that was a blunder. Because if he take, wait, no, not really. If he takes, I takes, I kinda. I'm not sure. If he takes, I should also be able to take back the knight. I'm in trouble. Okay, so oh my lord, what's this? That's a fork, sir. Tell you about the bishop pair, man. Tell you about the bishop pair, man. All right, we're fine. He's also not able to take because he's just not able to take. So he moves the rook. We grab for sure. He takes back. Now he's trying to flag. If I push, he plays here. Still a very weird position. Because if I takes, he forks. If I push, he plays here. If I takes, he plays here. Okay, I'm just gonna take this. Let's just take this and then play bishop here and guard the pawn. So okay, at least I managed to draw. Okay, I'm ahead by a pawn actually. Okay, now I'm going to play here, guard the pawn, and I just need to not lose on time and I should be fine. I have a pass pawn, by the way, so I'm going to try to win with the pass pawn. I'm going to try to roll the pawn up the board. Okay, so knight back, king activity is crucial. Now, whenever you're playing against a knight, it's very important that you're always looking out for forks. Okay, he wants his knight there, which is a good square for the knight. All right, let me just go here first. Once he checks, I move. That's fine. Let's just move. And then I'm trying to check and then roll the pawn up the board. Okay, let's check and then roll. I'm more than likely going to be losing these pawns. I'm also trying to attack his d3 pawn. So once the knight goes somewhere, I'm going to try to attack d3. If I'm able to take d3 and I have two pass pawns, I should win. Oh, completely missed that move. Okay, let's play king up, knight takes, and then just roll the pass pawn. I have to play fast. Check. Okay, check I'm trying to protect the pawn. Let's keep protecting the pawn. Yeah, I can't protect the pawn if I'm trying to win, so I'm gonna have to lose that pawn as well. What? Okay, yeah, he's trying to draw. I'm gonna have to lose. Like, the thing is, when you're trying to win, you have to just risk losing, and that's crazy. Okay, maybe I should have played king e6. Because all he needs to do is get his rook behind my pawn. With 40 seconds on the clock, it's almost impossible. Like, all he needs to do is sack his knight for my pass pawn. Okay, now my king is where it needs to be. Now I'm gonna push. I think he's trying to win on time. Usually when they try to win on time, they start to play fast and make bad moves. Okay, so rook goes here. Let's roll the pawn. Oh wait, isn't this winning the rook? If he gets behind the pawn, then I just need to move my rook. And then I'm just gonna queen the pawn next move. That's crazy. Okay, let's queen the pawn. Now it's just a matter of not losing on time. Okay, let's hit the knight. Once the knight move, I go. Can I just sack? Yeah, sacking is just winning. Unless I'm messing it up. Okay, now I go here. If he goes here, I pin. 20 seconds. Okay, pin. Very good, very good. Now I go here. Now I go here. Very good. Whoa, that's winning. Nice. Okay, now I'm just going for the pawn, and this should be GG's. Move the king, and then just roll the pawn up the board. Roll the pawn up the board. And he resigns.